Good evening and welcome back to the July 23rd meeting of the Livermore City Council. We just came back from our closed session and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Let the roll call show that all of the members of the council are present and accounted for with the exception of Councilmember Spadowski, who is excused. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, was there any reportable action taken during the closed session?
Mr. Mayor, no, there was not.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Moving on to proclamations and presentations. Some of the fun stuff. So this is from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Play Ball. And this is Play Ball Week, the week of July 29th through August 5th, which is coming up this very weekend. And this is through the U.S. Conference of Mayors and celebrating is considered the national pastime. So this is, I'll be presenting this to David Wetmore and Bill Boomrod, who is just killer on the grill at the Little League World Series games. So, whereas the sport of baseball is called America's national pastime, and whereas the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Major League Baseball have come together to recognize June through August as Play Ball Summer, and whereas Play Ball Summer encourages families and communities to participate in the game of baseball, which teaches the youth the value of teamwork, perseverance, leadership, and sportsmanship. And whereas in conjunction with Play Ball Summer, the City of Livermore declares July 29th through August 5th, 2018, Play Ball Week in Livermore, when the city once again hosts the Little League Intermediate World Series. And whereas the best Little League 50-70 division baseball teams from around the globe will be in Livermore to compete in what is now the world's pastime. Now, therefore, the City of Livermore proclaims July 29th through August 5th, 2018 as Play Ball Week in Livermore and welcomes participants, organizers, and fans to the 2018 Little League Intermediate World Series at Max Baer Park. So I can present this to Bill Boomrod and Dave Wetmore and Kathleen Mincer. There we go. Now what year? 6 years?
6 years.
Awesome. Because we're all having fun, that's why.
Good answer.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say a few words, sir.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, City Council, City staff, audience. My name is Dave Wetmore. I'm a volunteer with Little League Baseball in the Tri-Valley. And of course, Bill Boomrad and Kathleen Mincer, who we've been very good friends for a long, long Little League time and other volunteer efforts. We're very excited. 4 days from now, 9 of the 12 teams will be situated in the hotel, and those kids are just going to be having a blast. A little bit of an update. We'd love to welcome everybody out on Saturday at 4 o'clock to the Bankhead area, where we're going to have our opening ceremonies. And games start on Sunday, 9, 12, 3, and 6, and they go throughout the week. ESPN rolls in on Friday, August the 3rd, and then the 4th and 5th it'd be ESPN Live in regards to the International USA Championships and, of course, the World Championship game on Sunday, August the 5th. At this time, we have 7 of the 12 teams are in. If I remember this right, Asia Pacific is a team out of Seoul, South Korea. Australia, it's a team out of Perth. Europe, Africa, it's a team out of Brno, Czech Republic. Latin America, the winner is out of Mexico. Puerto Rico, it's a team out of Guayama, Puerto Rico. Southeast winner was last night. It's a team out of Boynton Beach, Florida. And of course, we're very proud of our local team, which is a combined team of Granada Little League and Livermore Little League. So we have really a host team this year. So the other 5 teams for USA regional winners and the Canada winner will be determined either Wednesday or Thursday night, and they fly in on Friday. So we're excited. We hope everybody gets to come out. Remember, it's free. There's no cost. It's just a lot of fun. And we are going to welcome the world to Livermore, and you're going to see a lot of different looking shirts walking around downtown. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Thank you. So that's 4 o'clock at the Shea Plaza in front of the Bankhead Theater on Saturday, the 28th. Gameplay starts on the 29th at Max Bear Park. Great collaboration between LARPD, baseball, and Livermore. So certainly looking forward to that. And I said, Bill Boomrod's on the grill. So get out there and support baseball. And these kids love the game. It's really a joy to watch them, the passion that they bring. So great. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the Citizens Forum. These are items that are not on the agenda. The City Council can neither deliberate nor take action on any of the items. I ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We have Karen Anderson, Allegra Williams, and David McGuigan. Karen Anderson.
Good evening. I have kind of a bundle here. My name is, yes, it is Karen Anderson, and I go back to the days when the donut wheel was Purity Stores. I've been in Livermore a very long time. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. I am going to deliver a packet with copies of letters for everybody in the City Council. It's one of the 3 most important letters I've ever written in my life. The other 2 were to Zone 7 Water Agency, who was very gracious in allowing us to speak about the Arroyo Moat Show, Maderos Parkway project, and go on tours with us. And the other letter was one I wrote in the Independent to the public to make them aware of the actions that are being considered. I'm speaking for about 100-plus people that signed a petition showing concern about some of the things are going to transpire. They're very busy with their families and all that. I am speaking for them, but I'm especially trying to speak for those that are innocent and can't speak for themselves. I have a great concern about the animals that are going to be affected by this proposal. I really appreciate Zone 7 is reconsidering ways in which to work with this. The other thing is I want everyone to know that the history of that area is very interesting, and I've written something for all of you about this. The almond orchard down there, I believe, is the last remaining almond orchard from the very early days of Livermore when it began with William Mendenhall. And I'm trying to get that preserved as well. It's hard to know how to condense something in 3 minutes, and that's why I appreciate you reading this. I know that they talk about that restoration is in the plans, but these are not like tennis rackets and cars. These are living animals that can suffer, that could face being buried alive. There are many concerns I have about the project. And wherever it is, I understand that erosion, I never had seen the erosion like I saw last year, is something that needs to be addressed. So I appreciate their efforts, and I think they're a team that can figure out many things. And I just wanted to bring this to the attention of all of you as well. And I thank you for your time. I will be bringing these posters over. You can enjoy when you're having your cup of coffee on the table. And I'm hoping somebody, the public can have a chance to look at this. It shows what William Mendenhall's home was like and some of the things that aren't there anymore. And I thank you all very much for your time. And good luck to you. It looks like a very active community that we have here. So, okay, thank you very much.
If you give those to the city clerk, and she
Yes.
can distribute to
Yes.
everybody else. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I wanted to say that I do have pets at home that have been very patient through all this, so if you excuse me, I'd love to stay, but they want their dinner. Okay.
Well, thank you. And you may recall that I spent 15 years on the Zone 7 board, so I know most of the people out there. Thank you. Allegra Williams, Dave McGuigan, Greg Scott.
Good evening, City Council members and members of this flourishing community. My name is Allegra Williams, and I am a very proud parent at Lawrence Elementary on Portola Avenue. My family and I, we live in the neighborhood right across the street from Portola, along with many other families from our school. I am here tonight after speaking with both the Livermore Police Department and the City Engineering Office about the crosswalk on Portola Avenue and Enos Way. My daughter loves to walk to school. She loves to walk home from school. I have decided out of fear to not cross this crosswalk when I can with my daughter at drop-off or pickup. This crosswalk is within the 25 miles per hour zone, and when children are present, there are cars going approximately 40 miles per hour. If you like, I can send each of you videos that I have taken at the corner of Enos and Portola at that crosswalk. As we all know, Portola is basically a small highway through our community, and from personal experience, this crosswalk covering 4 lanes and a center divide lane is a serious safety hazard to anyone, including these families and children attending the school. As our wonderful school continues to grow and thrive, more and more families from our neighborhood continue to join. Thus, the crosswalk becomes more of a safety topic. Tonight, I ask for your help. We need a safe and simple solution. A crossing guard, a flashing light, each of those could save a pedestrian's life. The dimly lit flashing lights with the lights in the ground will not do. Those are not bright enough. The example of this is on North Livermore Ave and Walnut. After speaking in detail with Carlos and Diego from the City Engineer's Office over the past school year, I understand that these lights now have a patent hold and are difficult to maintain with the lights in the ground. Because the road has 4 lanes and a center divide, I ask for a sign in the center divide stating that it is California state law to stop for pedestrians, and the larger rectangular flashing lights, which are quite visible even during the daytime, on either side of the road. An example of this is on South Livermore Avenue and 2nd Street. The engineer's office has cited that the crosswalk had been surveyed and that the number of pedestrians crossing was not sufficient to install a crossing guard or lights, and that it was simply not in the budget. The growing group of parents from our neighborhood do not even want to cross that crosswalk with their small children. Thus, of course, there will be no sufficient number of people crossing there when surveyed. Sergeant Robbins of the Livermore Police Department Traffic Unit has been extremely helpful and persistent in trying to slow down the commuter traffic and has kindly added patrol cars when they are available. However, cars continue to speed, and the patrol cars, when they are there, this traffic slows down. And when they are not there, cars continue to speed. A bit of information, Lawrence Elementary is a newly reopened school site. Thus, drivers are not used to slowing down, let alone stopping for pedestrians in the crosswalk. There are no stops for drivers along Portola from 1st Street to North Livermore Avenue, and it is a commuter's thoroughfare. There used to be a crossing guard when it was a high school, and there is no longer a crossing guard. I respect the importance of a budget and time, thank you very much. However, I am also deeply concerned for the safety of pedestrians in front of Lawrence Elementary. I hope that with your help, we can make this a much safer crosswalk for our school and for our entire community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
Dave McGuigan, Greg Scott, Jim Schmidt.
Since you brought a suit against Alameda County without the public having any opportunity to find out that you were even considering such a lawsuit before the filing, I have printed out a copy of your complaint. I'm requesting that this copy of the complaint be entered into the council records. That way, if people want to find out what you're up to, they can simply view the complaint in the clerk's office, so they don't have to pay the $25. I also need to point out that you violated the Brown Act during the June 25th meeting. You made a proclamation observing elder abuse awareness that was not agendized. I'll point out that proclamations are official acts and as such are subject to noticing and public comment. And in case you're thinking the public wouldn't want to comment, the posting requirements are there to ensure the public can become informed if they desire, not to announce things arbitrarily. I can tell you that if you were to issue a proclamation honoring the Livermore Police, I would certainly want to make some comments. Deliberately lying to the public, ethics complaints, voter rights complaints, interfering in criminal prosecution. It's really no accident we have a police chief who deliberately kept a sexual predator in uniform. I'd like to draw your attention to this article that I came across entitled, "Police Protect Their Own, and Now an Innocent Woman is Dead," by Leonard Pitts, Jr. of the Miami Herald. The first paragraphs give the summary. They did not have to die. That's the bitter truth. Katie Sasser and her friend John Hall would likely be alive if cops and prosecutors in Glynn County, Georgia had done their jobs. But they were more interested in protecting one of their own. So Sasser and Hall were shot to death in June by Sasser's estranged husband, Robert C. Sasser. He then killed himself. I guess we should consider ourselves lucky here in Livermore. Our police only trample on our civil rights and sexually exploit teenage girls. At least nobody's died yet. At least not that we know of.
Greg Scott, Jim Schmidt, John Stein.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Marchand, Livermore City Council, City of Livermore staff, those in video land, and those in the audience of this room. I am Greg Scott, and I speak about homelessness in Livermore. I also have had the privilege of watching a homeless man and friend dying essentially from homelessness. It has been said in this chamber that homelessness is a regional problem. That it is. It is also a local problem. Watching someone dying in front of you from homelessness is very local. Homelessness is as local as is possible for a human being. I have been asked, what is the solution to homelessness? As I stated the first time I spoke in front of the Livermore City Council last fall, the solution to homelessness is a commons. If you do not have a place for homeless to go for safety and shelter, then you have essentially done nothing other than wasting a lot of time and resources. The Livermore City Council does not want a commons for the homeless. Other communities realize the need. Front page of the San Francisco Chronicle, Friday, July 20th, 2018, is the article, "Church parking lots offer housing relief. Churches in Castro Valley and East Palo Alto are offering parking spaces for those living in their cars." There is nothing in Livermore like this. There is not even the homeless refuge warming shelter or even a cooling shelter in the summer here. What is the impediment? The Livermore City Council? We seem not to realize how multifaceted the problem of homelessness is. The parent with a 27-year-old adult child with a practical college degree or graduate degree is wondering why that adult child cannot start their life. How can they in a community of $750,000 to $800,000 starter dwellings? The loss of young people forced to go elsewhere, as the loss of retirees who can no longer afford to stay here, is a loss of community assets. So is it a loss to the community when labor of modest wages cannot get housing and some are forced to live in their cars. This is a loss of community resilience. It is an erosion of our democratic republic by the rivulet of our community in the watershed of our nation. And the little bit of affordable housing that we offer offers solution to a small percentage of the need. The centralization of the homeless in Vineyard 2.0 is not a good strategic or tactical solution, Livermore. It is simply NIMBY, not in my backyard. Did the neighborhood east of North Livermore Avenue, west of North I Street, south of Walnut and north of Park really want this? Or do they lack the socioeconomic and therefore political clout to say otherwise? Or is the neighborhood asleep? Or are those in this neighborhood too busy working 2, 3, or 4 jobs to pay over 30% of their gross income for rent? Vineyard 2.0 is not a good solution, Livermore. Cobbled together $17 million or not. The only adequate solution is the commons for the homeless. If we cannot answer the question of where do we have for the homeless to go, then we haven't solved the problem. We haven't even approached the problem. Spending $17 million to house 24 does not solve the problem. There are many, many more homeless here than that.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Jim Schmidt, John Stein, Carl Winty.
Good evening, Mayor Marchant and council and staff. I'm Jim Schmidt, the president of Livermore Valley Opera, speaking on behalf of the Opera and Livermore Shakespeare Festival. Both of our organizations have matured and grown, especially in the last 10 years. Despite our artistic accomplishment, both organizations are in need of space for storage, rehearsals, and for LVO, space to construct the impressive sets that grace the stage of the Bankhead Theater. When I joined the Opera 12 years ago, we had construction space in the old Nob Hill Grocery just down the block. That was 12 years ago, thanks to John Shirley's connections, and it was free. We were evicted on short notice about 6 years ago as they thought it was sold. We went to a tool shed for 1 year. Then we went to a grungy part of Growth Brothers with a leaky roof. Then to Livermore surplus property on Chestnut. Then we moved to the Joanne Fabric Store on Chestnut. Each of these was a painful move for our volunteers, moving lumber, sets, power tools, furniture, paint, etc. When the city prepared to demolish the Chestnut space to build much needed housing, it was Mayor John Marchand and others in the city that saved us by cajoling Nob Hill owners to accept us back, except this time at a significant rent. Shakespeare has faced a similar fate, occupying space at Chestnut and Growth Brothers, and building in Stockton and trucking staging to Livermore. Both companies could lose their current spaces with little notice. In fact, we have no notice. All this time, our companies were maturing and are a credit to Livermore. I want to read a quote from an article in last week's San Francisco Chronicle, written by Joshua Kosman, the top respected performing arts critic in the Bay Area. Joshua writes about Philip Skinner, an accomplished Bay Area opera singer who had sung at Seattle, San Diego, and New York. I quote Joshua Kosman, "Philip has found smaller outlets for tackling bigger roles, such as singing the title role in Wagner's The Flying Dutchman at Livermore Valley Opera. We didn't used to get this kind of press. Now we also get singers from around the country. They love #1, the Bankhead Theater, #2, the Downtown, and #3, the Wine District. And many want to come back here." So in summary, LVO and Shakespeare are doing our part to bring quality performing arts and top-level performers and a wide assortment of influential people to Livermore. We bring a lot from the San Francisco area that don't even know where Livermore is, but once they see it, they love it. Both companies are doing well, but we cannot compete with the retail market for our needed space. It's been proposed that we build a low-cost building on a small piece of city property that cannot be used for residential or commercial, and that we be allowed temporary use of this trailer space when it's vacated until we can find other more appropriate space. We are asking the council to direct the staff to work with our organizations to help us produce a quality building estimate that we can take to our donors. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree. Philip Skinner was phenomenal in both Cinderella and The Flying Dutchman. It was quite a production. And for those who haven't seen the Livermore Shakes productions, it was fantastic too. Okay, John Stein, Carl Winty.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. There was an interesting article in the paper saying that the Tri-Valley was becoming the next Silicon Valley, with the labs taking the place of Stanford research. I would urge that you begin thinking about what parts of Santa Clara County you like and what parts you don't, and do some long-term planning together with our neighboring cities as to long-term planning for things like water availability, traffic, air pollution, housing, and a whole host of other things. I mean, right now you can go to San Jose or Campbell or any of the cities down there, and a lot of us came from there because we thought it was too crowded. So there are issues that are, city-focused, and there are issues that are valley-focused, but some of them are transportation. Essentially, we talk about transit-oriented development, but we have only a skeletal transit system. We talk about traffic, but are we planning and building for the increased population and increased workforce? What will the housing look like? Right now, we have essentially basically modern mediocrity as far as housing. Everybody builds essentially the same housing, a cube, tall, narrow, with a balcony and a peaked roof as a matter of right under the form-based zoning. It would be nice to have some more architectural variability, co-housing. We've got to decide whether we want to go up or down with submerged parking or multi-story apartments with modern conveniences like elevators. Many of the current houses are inaccessible by the elderly or the handicapped. We need to look at what our city looks like as far as landscaping. Do we want to be all buildings in concrete? Do we want to have green space? We need to find places for new neighborhood schools, churches, shopping, all of the things that a larger population will require. We need to decide, what the ultimate size will be and probably relook at the general plan. We also have to worry about, as increased population and population density comes in, things like increased homeless and crime. So what things do you like about the Santa Clara Valley, and what things don't you like? Do you want to spend 20 or 30 minutes trying to find a parking space when you come home? How do we maintain our community identity? We plan basically on a 5-year basis, but this is probably more a generational type plan. So I would urge you to give some consideration to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. And finally, Carl Wente.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Bob's, staff, Mr. City Manager, thank you all for what you do. Process of good government at work. The magnitude of what it takes to put that packet together every 2 weeks, it's astounding. Good government is a process. Sometimes it's slow and cumbersome because it's supposed to act on the will of the people, not the whim of the people, and going through. So reading all of that. Now my Sunday before City Council meeting is now a study of what goes through there. Mr. Fire Marshal Ryan Rucker, thank you for what you do. Appreciate it. Service. Lieutenant Josh Ratcliffe, thank you for what you do. Those in uniform that aren't here, thank you for what you do. As I was running through, I learned about projects, right? We have street light bulb projects, downtown sculpture project, lighting luminaire installation projects, airport airfield marking project, demolition of downtown property and site preparation projects. What is a project? What defines a project? How many are there? How many types are there in Livermore? And then there's the Pleasant View Lane annexation improvements. Improvements, is that a project? Seems sort of project-like, but there's definitions. And then districts. I'm just confused by districts because what is a district? Are there a difference between district and a special district? Look forward to the answer, Mr. Alessio and Mr. Alcala. There's community facilities, community service, tax district, voting, reassessments, refunding, consolidated, non-consolidated. Is there a sunset? Do they go in perpetuity? Are they all tied to a bond, a tax, a region? How many are there? How many districts do we have in Livermore? I'm very curious. I learned about the Cortez-Knox-Hertzberg Local Government Reorganization Act, which oversees the city and corporations annexations, special districts, and special districts consolidations. When I brought up the variance versus annexation as it relates to Kincannon, I learned that I want to learn more about the no-growth boundary. What is fundamentally no-growth boundary? The Williamson Act, Measure D. I want to continue to learn and sit down, and thank you for everybody on the city staff that's taken a meeting with me to educate. Learned about resolutions authorizing the budgeted funds, resolutions, rescinding resolutions, resolutions accepting closeout reports for consolidated reassessments and refunding districts. I don't even know totally what a district is. Now we're consolidating. And then I learned about the Mark Roos Local Bond Pooling Act of '85 for the authority for the revenue bonds to be transferred to the Livermore Capital Project Financing Authority. I don't know what an authority is. There's an authority, there's an agency, there's a district, right? And there's all of these things. I learned about the debt management policy disclosure as required by Government Code Section 88551, required when the council acts as a legislative body. So the Livermore Capital Projects Financing Authority has commissioners. Where do these commissioners come from? Who appoints? What does that look like? I'm curious. Take my answer offline. And then we go into all the funds you have. This is the question there, right? We have general funds, special reserve funds, capital project funds. Here mentions the Livermore Capital Project Refinancing Authority, but the authority is listed within the list of funds. So is it a fund? Is it an authority? I don't know. It's confusing. But this is good government. You live and learn, right? And you study. And thank you all for continuing to educate. And I'm doing this for the purpose of a engaged electorate is what good government is about. Of the people, for the people, by the people. I want to get the next generation involved, asking these questions and living and learning so we can continue to make the world a better place. I do have a question. The resolution to adopt the debt policy only for the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Does that mean we've already adopted that debt policy for every other agency? And do they have to? We got to assume yes. Also learned about, I'm going to be quick, I'm almost done, about the Community Facilities District and the annual reports, only if they've come, the bonds issued after 2001, not before 2001. I get it. Learned about eminent domain. And Mr. Steve Stewart, your report that came out in January 29, 2018, it was good to reread that, right? To see what the priorities were for downtown. Also learned that districts are coming, whether we want it or not. Be part of the government, your public hearings as it relates to districting. So we have fair, equitable districting. I'm so sorry for going long. Here's to Livermore, of the people, for the people, by the people. Thank you for getting back to me, Mr. Coomer. Let's get together.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. And just so you know, the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act created the local agency formation commissions a little over 50 years ago, and I'm the representative from the city on that. So, thank you. Okay, so with that, we are done with the Citizens Forum. Moving on to consent calendar. Does anyone wish to pull any of the consent calendar items for discussion? If you have a card to speak on one of the consent items, please turn that in. Does anybody wish to speak to an item? Okay, we've got a couple of cards here. It looks like for the consent calendar. Okay. For discussion, we will have 4.2 and 4.13. So what I would like to ask is for a motion for 4.01. I presume that's 4.02. So 4.1 through 4.3 to 4.12, and then 4.14. So we're going to pull 4.12 and 4.02 and 4.13 for discussion. Do I have a motion for the other ones?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion made by Councilmember Coomber.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Carling. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed unanimously. Now on to 4.02. This is the resolution authorizing the budgeted expenditure for local cable programming services in the Tri-Valley TB30. Mr. Branning.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Evan Branning, and today I'm speaking on behalf of Unify Livermore. We're a local advocacy group that's looking to try to make sure we get the truth out. There's been a lot of different stories going around in the world, a lot of different things that you read about or hear about, and we're just trying to make sure to get out as much information as possible. The local TV actually airing the meetings as well as putting them on demand has been absolutely invaluable to this, since we can always point to the actual words you said, what has actually happened, and video of it, no less. But for Unify Livermore, we are asking, if possible, as part of this contract, you ask to see if you can raise the resolution of the streams. Currently, sorry, I'm reading from prepared remarks, which I'm not used to, if you notice me stutter more than typical. we're asking that Tri-Valley Community Television improves the picture and sound quality of their video streams. 47% of millennials and Gen Xers no longer watch traditional TV and rely on internet video streaming. With that said, in 2015, a UK company did a survey and found that 33% of users abandoned a low-quality stream. They also found that only 3% of viewers stayed for more than 30 minutes. We want to try to increase community engagement, and we do think that improving the video resolution and quality would be an important step in that, if possible. In addition, due to the timeliness of some of the issues that are raised, we're hoping that we could have the on-demand portion put up sooner than typically 5 to 6 days that it takes now. I understand as part of this contract, we might be able to request those and see if there is a technological fix to those problems. Other than that, again, we were really grateful for having the community TV and having all of the meetings actually aired as well as on demand. It's an awesome service, and any city that doesn't should be jealous of it. So thank you very much for supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Branning. And there is hope, because when we do move out of this wonderful trailer, we will be acquiring new equipment. And you may not know this, but we only added the direct to the computer ability only about 3 or 4 months ago so that the slides didn't have to go through a series of interfaces. We actually can directly download that, and Neil Snedeker could explain that to you much better than I could. But so the technology is going to be improved. It's unfortunately, one of the things is by virtue of the older technology that's in this room. But we will be improving technology, and we do have the public education and government funds to accomplish a good deal of that. So there's hope. But thank you for following this, and we really support TV 30 because it really is a wonderful way to get the message out to the community. Because as you probably noticed, people can't see the slides when you're in the audience. It's actually easier to see them on television. So they'll be getting even better. So thank you for bringing that up.
I do have a question. I mean, I guess I've watched the stream. What's the problem with the picture and the sound?
It's just the resolution's fairly low. So if you're trying to...
So you can't tell if it's Coomber or me talking? Is that the guy?
It's impossible to tell the two of you apart anyway.
And how much is this, the equipment that we own versus TV 30?
TV 30 owns most of the actual equipment in here, but it's the actual interfaces that ultimately will be upgraded so that we won't be having to broadcast from a trailer. You'll basically have the high quality equipment right in the council chamber. So it's a whole click up from where we are now. In addition, in between that time, TV 30 is doing a number of technological improvements. Not only on going to streaming, but actually in their interface with Comcast. The problem actually is in that interface between the two of them. What leaves TV 30 is actually very high quality in many cases. What shows up at Comcast isn't. So they're struggling with that problem and been doing so for the past several months. We hope over the next couple of months to get that solved.
So is Mr. Branning talking about uploading on demand in 5 days or uploading on our website in 5 days, or both?
It's the on-demand feature that he was noting there was a delay.
Okay, thanks. And that's really up to TV 30 and Comcast.
And on that, what we can do is follow up with TV 30.
Great, thanks.
So what I would request is some kind of short memo summarizing what I just heard, because I'm never going to be able to repeat that. And I don't know exactly what I heard in terms of what quality we'll get when. So if you could be just clear on it, then that would be helpful.
Very good. And we'll also include the information from TV 30 on the specific request from Councilmember Carling.
And one of the things that's really helpful is the way that you can link the minutes to the actual program itself. Way back in the day, you used to have to scroll through the whole thing. And if you missed it, it was difficult to get back. But now you can just click on it, and immediately it brings you up to where on the agenda where the item is. So it's a vast improvement. It's even better than having to rewind the VHS tapes. You know, you can.
So I'd
Yeah.
Do we still have more comment on that item?
No, that's the only.
Do you want to take care of that?
Yes.
Okay, so I would move 4.02, subject to we get this clarity on what the technology is going to deliver when.
Okay, very good.
If you could change the words on that, we will be bringing the information back, but we'd actually like this to go into effect immediately rather than after the memo returns. Because
That's what I meant.
Okay.
I meant
Very
approve this with the understanding that you will come back with
There
the
we go.
memo clarifying what we're going to get when.
I'll second that.
Everybody's paying attention. I like that. Okay. Moved and seconded. In favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed unanimously. Very good. And now moving on to, hold on just a second here. Okay, 4.13, which is the resolution accepting the closeout reports for the Consolidated Reassessment and Refunding District of 2002. Ms. Copps.
Hello, Connie Copps, 1422 Tulip Way. I have a problem with the report as written, and it goes back to what Mr. Wente was brought up. A lot of, if you read this report as a citizen or a layman, it really doesn't speak to the average person. I've got a bachelor's degree, so I feel intelligent enough to decipher things. But then when I wanted to follow up and I wanted to read a little bit more into it, I went into archived agendas, and or I tried to, and I've never had trouble accessing your online or your archived agendas, which go before 2008. But within the last few months, my computer wouldn't do it. So I came down to the library, and I couldn't access your archived agendas either on that as well. And so I really wanted to learn more about the whole CRD. And if you really read 413, the resolution, it really does go over the average person's head. I don't think we're being considerate enough for our audiences when we write. Some of our resolutions, especially when they date back to factual information, and it goes back to what I brought up at LAFTA last month. I'm trying to find, historical information on certain areas, and it's really hard. Please start, I would poll this and try to at least have the company that you hired to write this refer back to when they refer to specifics, tell the reader, where we can find that fact as well in our records, because it just needs to be written so that we can comment intelligibly on this. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, so noted. Okay, very good.
Is there some issue, though, with the archived agendas?
We can certainly follow up on that.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, with that, do I have a motion for 4.13?
I'll move 4.13.
Moved by Vice Mayor Warner,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Coomber. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously as well. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to 5.01. This is the hearing to receive protests related to the annual fire hazard abatement program. Fire Marshal Rucker. Good evening.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Ryan Rucker from the Livermore Pleasanton Joint Powers Authority, just in case Mr. Wente is still here. On April 9, 2018, the Council adopted Resolution 2018-45, declaring existing conditions of growing weeds, accumulated refuse, rubbish or dirt on private property, streets, parkways, and sidewalks adjacent to each parcel of real property are a public nuisance and should be abated. On April 23, 2018, the City Council ordered the abatement of hazardous vegetation on the parcels identified in Exhibit A of the attached resolution and declare that the abatement costs, including administrative costs incurred by the city, are the responsibility of the property owner. A schedule has been provided to all property owners, which includes abatement timelines, types of work needed, based on parcel type, as well as the administrative costs which are charged when the city performs the abatement. The fire department concluded hazardous vegetation abatement on 4 parcels in June of 2018 at a total cost of $6,636. The public hearing tonight is to consider any and all protests, and if the council finds it appropriate, adopt a resolution overruling protests, confirm the 2018 weed abatement assessments, and direct staff to forward a certified copy of the assessment report to the county auditor. Staff is available for questions.
Any questions?
Did you have any late people
No,
pay up today?
We didn't have any late people. We did have a couple of parcels that were on the list where we got some payment at the last minute and a couple of others that committed to pay. So
Oh.
those folks were removed from the list.
Okay,
So
good.
that is in your supplemental memo. We'd like to draw your attention that you have a new Exhibit A, which is actually the 4 that you will be, your action will cover this evening, the 4 parcels remaining.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So many.
Okay, with that, I'm going to open the public hearing to hear any protests or concerns. Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. Is there a motion?
I'll move we accept the recommendation.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Carling,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Coomber. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. 5.02, this is a hearing to receive community input regarding boundaries and composition of districts to be established for district-based elections pursuant to the Elections Code.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Doug Alessio, your Administrative Services Director. If you recall, on July 9th, you adopted a resolution directing staff to begin the transition to district-based elections pursuant to the California Voter Right Act. What we're looking to do here is create 4 districts in the city so that we can elect council members by district and the mayor at large. To that end, we've engaged a demographer, Michael Wagaman. Michael has 20 years of redistricting experience. His prior work includes serving as an analyst with the statewide database, the home of California's nonpartisan redistricting database, housed at UC Berkeley, as a line drawer for the state legislature, and as a liaison to the Citizens Redistricting Commission. More recently, he helped Concord complete its recent conversion to district elections, and is currently helping Vacaville with its process. When he's done with Livermore, he will begin working with Brentwood here in the Bay Area. So that's the introduction. I'll let Mr. Wagaman take it away from here. Oops.
Right there. Sorry about that. Where am I clicking? There we go. The process we're starting here today is part of a process that's partly laid out by state law for cities that are converting to district elections. It mandates that the first couple of hearings are really to listen and gather information before you start talking about how you're going to draw lines, and really to do that process. And part of my presentation will be to kind of orient you to what redistricting law exists, what are kind of the principles you're going to be looking at, so you can gather that information and know what you are looking for. The other thing out of this hearing is, after you've heard information from myself, council, and staff, heard from members of the public, if there are things you're not seeing that you think are going to be important, at the next meeting is where you're going to start giving direction as far as what kind of lines you may want to see. So if there are things we don't have prepared for you, letting us know so we can have those for that next council meeting. The timeline above, I won't linger on, but again, multiple rounds of hearings before you start drawing lines, And then once lines are drawn, making sure that those are published so that the public can look at those lines and provide specific feedback as far as how to divide the city with a goal of adopting an ordinance by basically the end of November. Noting again the implementation timeline, because this is ongoing with your current election system, the implementation is for your 2020 election. I will also note that after you complete this process, in 2020, the census will also be conducting its new census to recount everybody in the city, which means you'll be revisiting this process for the 2022 elections. So this is kind of a prelude to doing this all over again. The city has set up a website that includes baseline maps to help orient people to some of the geography of the city, background information, and importantly, a toolkit that allows members of the public to submit testimony. The current tools up there are to particularly submit testimony as relates to communities of interest, which we will talk about. Once we get through these first 2 rounds of hearings, we'll add additional tools that will allow the public to submit their own maps for your consideration. So just as you'll receive potential maps for your consideration from me, you will also be able to consider any maps from the public. They will all be processed the same as if they came from me. The city has also done outreach tools to members of the public. I can confirm that in that the person I'm staying with tonight, when I saw her, said, "Oh, I just got a mailer about district elections. Is that why you're here?" So I can confirm your city staff is working hard to reach out to members of the public. What is the districting process? It's fundamentally how do you divide the city. These are the squares up there are a city with 16 people in it, and you can see it could be divided lots of different ways. Those are not comprehensive, all the ways you could divide up that theoretical city, but which of those are good, which of those are bad, that's the information you're really gathering and which you're providing direction to, is which way is the best way to divide the city in order to provide the most representation for the members of the community. The city, the chart here shows the city's population along with some other breakdowns of the voting age population, those over the age of 18, and the citizen voting age population, which are basically those who are eligible to vote. The things I would note on this chart are, one, you draw districts under federal law, under federal case law, based on population. So it's not registered voters or eligible voters, it's population you're drawing on. It is a little unusual that cities are transitioning now to district elections in the middle of a decade, but you are actually using the data from the 2010 census. So I would recognize that the city probably has and had significant population change in those recent years. It's not that you can't ignore that growth, you can't look at where population growth has happened, but you do ultimately need to balance districts based on that 2010 census, knowing there'll be an opportunity to revisit those lines in 2020. I will also just note that the population numbers you see on the screen are about 500 people different from if you were to just Google what the population was. Part of that reason, or the reason for that exists, is since 2010, the city has changed its boundaries and it has had some incorporations where there are people who were counted in 2010 under the census but weren't part of the city at the time. So that's where you might see slight differences. Again, that's not adjusting for growth since 2010. It's just accounting for changes to the city's boundaries. And then the final note I'll make on this screen is the reason you're seeing the racial ethnic data here is race and ethnicity is probably one of the hardest issues in the redistricting process. It certainly is probably the place where there's the most litigation as relates to redistricting. It's something you have to look at, obviously, because that was one of the triggers for the CVRA. Here, it is something you sometimes have to look at, and we'll talk about relative to the Federal Voting Rights Act. But conversely, you have to make sure it's not your predominant factor in drawing lines. So it is a balancing act. And the key factor here is, based on our preliminary review of your city demographics, you're probably not covered under some of the provisions of the Federal Voting Rights Act. So those are some things that you would have had to look at, but are probably not applicable to your particular jurisdiction based on your demographics. So that's a prelude to what are kind of the law and criteria you're going to be looking at. This is a quick summary. The one thing I will note here is the Federal Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act are two very different things. The Federal Voting Rights Act will speak to a certain degree to how you draw your lines. As noted previously, it probably does not have particularly strong application to your city. The California Voting Rights Act and complying with the California Voting Rights Act doesn't speak to how you draw your lines in large factor. It just speaks to going to district elections. So by going to district elections, that's really the key thing as relates to the California Voting Rights Act. As relates to the Constitution, the first thing is one person, one vote. As noted previously, you're trying to divide districts to be as even as possible. That doesn't mean they have to be numerically exactly the same in population, but the goal is to get as close as you can to that line. There used to be court case history that there was what was called a safe harbor if you were within 10%. That has largely gone away. So the key thing here, to make this simpler, is you want to get as close to that line as possible. And when you're not getting close to that line, you want to know why you're not. So are you, for example, having a district that is slightly larger than another district because you are keeping a community whole, or because you're respecting a piece of topography in your city, or you are doing something else, so you know why that district isn't exactly equal. So that's the key thing here. Again, with 81,000 people, you're trying to draw 4 districts of approximately 20,000 people each. There we go. Oops, too far there. Again, as noted, race is something that in some cases you are required to look at under the Federal Voting Rights Act, but conversely under federal case law, it cannot be a predominant factor. That doesn't mean you can't look at those issues, but you want to look at them in the context of other traditional redistricting criteria, which we will discuss. Again, as discussed, the Federal Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act are different. Federal Voting Rights Act, you probably don't have significant exposure here in the city. California Voting Rights Act, you are largely addressing by going to district elections. California Election Code will go through each of these concepts one by one. Topography or continuity, pretty easy concept to understand, which is that the district needs to be connected together. All the parts need to touch. So in the chart on the bottom, you see the purple district is got 4 people in it, but they are not all connected together. So that district is not contiguous. Usually that is a pretty easy concept to understand. Sometimes it gets a little complicated when you have things like water treatment facilities that are not contiguous with the rest of the city. But generally, this is a pretty easy one for people to understand. Compactness. This is there are many, many, many math formulas that try to define compactness. The easiest way to do it is to look at it and see, does the shape look, for lack of a better term, rational? And when the shape is not compact, why is it not compact? Why is it stretched out? There are often very good justifiable reasons, which we'll talk about, that district is not compact. But everything else being equal, you want to have a district that looks more like the district on the left side than the one on the right side. Hopefully we're advancing. Topography and geography. Topography and geography, sometimes that is a natural feature, so that could be a mountain range, that could be a river, that could be a creek. There's lots of natural geography. There's also lots of man-made geography. A large thoroughfare, a freeway, a rail yard. Those are all things that can potentially divide communities, divide a town, and are things California law encourages you to look at. It's an example where, again, that very compact, pretty district on the bottom looks very nice, but if you looked and you see that blue line we put there, imagine that as a river, you could see how a lot of those districts now don't look as good once you look at the actual topography of a city. So that's something where you want to look at. Noting that some topography divides a city, sometimes it doesn't. So an example could be if you had a major thoroughfare. Sometimes if you had a thoroughfare running through a city, the people north of the thoroughfare may go to different schools, shop at different grocery stores, use different facilities. than the people south. And sometimes the people running along those thoroughfare actually share a common community of interest because they're impacted by that traffic on that thoroughfare. That's where, again, as a demographer, I can only tell so much by the data on the screen. It's really for members of the community, members of the public, for the council to identify where are the places that need to be kept together and where are the places where there may be natural boundaries in your city. As I was touching on communities of interest, this is sometimes one of the harder concepts to wrap yourself head around when you're thinking about it in a legal context. It's one of the easiest concepts to wrap your head around when you think like an actual human being, which is who are the people who want to be together in a district and have a reason to be together in a district? Who are the people who have a common interest together in being represented by the same person on your city council? The law really doesn't limit how you define a community. It's real, but there are lots of different ways you can look at defining a community. So, you can look at things like neighborhoods, common assets like schools, shopping, culture, language, immigration, employment, housing stock. There's lots of ways to define a community. And it's, again, something where the public plays a particularly important role in defining. That's why a lot of the tools that have been published by the city really focus on this issue. It's also the reason it's important because, again, in that chart on the bottom, if you imagine those red dots are a community of interest, those very compact lines suddenly don't look so good because you've taken a community of interest and divided it into 4 different districts there. Geography and data, this is just to kind of cover the building blocks you're going to be using throughout this process. The smallest block you're going to use are what are called census blocks. There are 1,800 of them in the city. It's important to understand census blocks often do actually correspond to city blocks. Sometimes they don't. They are generally following along boundaries that you would know, visible boundaries like a street. But those are the itty-bitty blocks that we can use the smallest building blocks we can use to configure districts, which are the green lines on the screen. The next step up are the blue lines. These are census block groups. Where they are useful to you in particular is in addition to the every decade census that is conducted, the Census Bureau every year is doing what's called the American Community Survey, where they are doing a sampling of members of your community, and they're asking them literally hundreds of questions about who they are, how they live, where they live. And that information is updated on an annual basis. So this is where you have more current information. And this is a place where, for example, if you identified renters were a community of interest within your city, they ask questions about how many people are renters and how many people are homeowners. So that would be the kind of information, but it's only reportable at the level of those blue lines. So not as fine a grain as some of your other geography. And then some of that data is only available at the census tract level. Those are those larger red lines, but again, not probably going to touch on those as much as the census block group data. The other concept I'll just touch on quickly, and we'll cover more at the next meeting, are these slices. These are all based on census geography. Because census geography doesn't always conform to your city boundaries, these are basically accounting for that. When we publish tools that will allow public to submit their own plans, they'll be using these slices. So instead of asking people to assign 1,700 little chunks, it breaks the city into 50 slices to make it a little easier for members of the public to submit their own plans and encourage a robust debate in your city. Last concept here as far as geography is precincts. Precincts are how elections are conducted. It is how electoral data, such as registration, is conducted. Those do not always conform to census geography. We've done some things to convert some of that precinct data to the census geography so it's available for your consideration, and it will be available in future reports as we start getting into the line drawing process. The thing I will note on this data is it is available. It is generally, I have to build it because you have to look at it in the context of compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act. So it's something we have to look at. But then I put it kind of in a little box there. So unless you tell me to look at it, I'm not looking at those kind of electoral impacts So that's always a concern sometimes with members of the public. So the fact it exists, we're talking about it, doesn't mean it's going to be a predominant factor in your districting process. So things to remember is A, you're trying to draw the city into 4 roughly equal chunks based on the population as existed in 2010. You want to look at those traditional redistricting criteria of looking at districts being contiguous, compact, where are your communities of interest, where are your natural boundaries of topography that could divide the city. Race is something you can look at, but should not be a predominant factor. And normally, as rushed as this process may seem to you, actually under the California Voting Rights Act, you normally only have 90 days to complete this. City staff work diligently with the source of the potential litigation to provide more time so that the public would have a more robust opportunity to participate. But if this feels rushed, in some cities, it's a lot worse. And then with that, just next phase is, again, we are in this phase of gathering information. At the end of the next council meeting, you'll start confronting these trade-offs and providing direction to me. I will put together at least 3 plans, potentially more, depending on what kind of issues you're identifying as a council. And then in meetings 3 and 4, you'll start going into actually looking at those lines, looking at publicly submitted lines, and actually settling on a map for implementation. So right now, what are you doing? Big thing gathering on information, again, is this concept of communities of interest. There's no database of communities of interest that exists. There's lots of tools, which I will show you, that might help identify a community of interest, but really identifying what those things are is one of the key things of this hearing and the next one. For members of the public, as a demographer, things that are helpful to me in identifying things, because I'm not from here, is where is the community of interest located? We are drawing boundaries. So saying a community of interest is seniors is only helpful if you say where the seniors live, because I can't draw a boundary around them otherwise. What is it that makes that community of interest a community? And why is it important that it be drawn together for purposes of representation? That last point's important because, for example, you may have a well-defined downtown area. Is that a community of interest that needs to be kept whole, or is it a community of interest that's actually better served by being in multiple districts? I don't know. That's something for you and members of the community to identify. I'm not biasing that. I'm just identifying as an example of the kinds of things we would be looking at. And then preparing yourself at that next hearing to start establishing priorities. Is it more important to do this or that? What are the things that are really important to make sure that your community is well represented? With that, I'll switch over quickly to, switch the thing. I'll just show you the tool we have before you, which is, this is interactive software that can be used, that we can zoom into different parts of the city if you wanted to. Again, if members of the public are testifying in areas or a council wants to identify an area, helping identify to me where those are, because I'm, again, learning your city and might not know off the top of my head where those are. And this is a map that can be changed. So if we wanted to bring up school locations, we could bring up school locations. If we want to bring up zoning information, we've loaded that zoning information. Things like that can be brought up. So this is interactive. And again, if there's things we don't have at this meeting, we'll make sure we have them available for you at the next meeting. With that, that ends my presentation. If there are questions, or if not.
Thank you. Questions at this point?
So I take it as we go through this and we identify the communities of interest, then you'll make that a set of a layer or a set of layers that we can then visualize here?
So if there are communities of interest that are identified with specific boundaries, then yes, we can add that on there, yes.
Councilor Crowley? Cumber? Any questions?
I'll hold off till next discussion.
Okay, with that, seeing no questions at this point, I'll open the public hearing. Evan Branning, Kyle Dickerson, John Stein.
Good evening again. My name's Evan Branning, and I just have a very simple request. As someone who has done canvassing and walked different precincts, if possible, when we're doing the different areas, the different districts, if we can align as close as possible to precincts. I know they do change more rapidly than the actual districts would change, but they don't usually change too dramatically. I think that would be really helpful for, canvassing for people who are actually working politics locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brenning. Kyle Dickerson, John Stein, Jacob Anderson.
Good evening. I'm Kyle Dickerson. I'm a software developer. I've been living and working here in Livermore for the last 9 years. Thank you for the opportunity for the community to share our concerns about the districting process here in Livermore. One of my concerns with districting across the country that I'd like to bring up here is the potential for now or in the future potential gerrymandering that has caused many issues around the country that I think we have an opportunity to do something to prevent that from occurring here in Livermore. We have the opportunity to create policies and procedures that can prevent that or mitigate that the potential problems that gerrymandering can create. If we create this districting and future redistricting using an independent citizens commission to drive that process that can detach potential political decisions from how those districts are drawn, that has widely been seen to help around the country. And or in addition to that, providing such a commission or whichever commission is being whichever process is being used to do redistricting, the use of one of several freely available open source computer algorithm-driven districting software programs that tries to remove explicit or implicit biases from the process to encourage that districting is done based on the data available rather than personal preferences, explicit or implicit. Computer algorithm-based redistricting has been supported by academic studies going back to the 1960s when the Supreme Court ruling required that districts be divided by equal populations. These programs are freely available for anyone to use, and they're open source, which means that the code for the software is available for anyone to review and evaluate for potential biases or errors in the software. There are several such software applications available. A few that are well known are the Better Automated Redistricting, produced by Micah Altman from Harvard University and Michael McDonald from George Mason University. B-Districting was produced by a private citizen, Brian Olson from Massachusetts, and Auto Redistrict, which was by a City of Milwaukee employee, Kevin Bass. We can protect our community from future gerrymandering by ensuring that our districts are drawn independently and based on data and not the biases and political preferences. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickerson. John Stein, Jacob Anderson, George Hastings.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. A couple of comments. One is there have not been very many annexations because we have an urban growth boundary that's been in place since 2002, I think. The other thing is if we're going to work together with the school district and park district, attendance areas and areas around parks should be considered. My major concern, though, is I understand about the Voting Rights Act and the California redistricting, which talks to language, ethnicity, and country of origin, basically. My problem is that I think Livermore overall is fairly homogeneous, and I'm not sure, how these maps will look. I understand the criteria, compactness, and communities of interest, but I think the only real question is what are the communities of interest, and then you can set up a software program to divide it up. But it would be nice to look at some maps and have some idea of how the redistricting would work depending upon which communities of interest you select, whether it's income level or renter versus owner or age or some of the other criteria. But otherwise, I don't think we have any idea of how things will turn out or what they will look like. As I said, based upon, my experience, you could almost pick the flagpole and divide it up into 4 segments that, accommodate equal populations. but it would be nice to see what the districts look like. I mean, what the area to circumference is for the various districts and how they're shaped, and depending upon which communities of interest you pick. Before you start the community input, I mean, just have, 5 or 6 examples of what it would look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Jacob Anderson, George Hastings, Brent Seiler.
Hello, Council. I actually only have a small, simple request, and that is that you keep the northeast area north of the freeway, known as Springtown, and its own district. That neighborhood and community up there is all in its own district with whatever, that it's kept together rather than separated. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Thank you. George Hastings, Brent Seiler, Carl Wente.
Thank you for let me speak. If there's any English teachers in the audience, I apologize for the following. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. The way Livermore has been run the way Livermore has been run is very successful. They may not always agree, but can live with what is taking place. What are the costs if we do not comply? When Livermore is divided up into districts, will all districts vote equally? If not, we could have a council member voted in by a handful of voters. I do not think that is a way to run a city. What do we gain by this districting process? Again, what are the costs, ramifications of leaving it as is? And once again, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hastings. Brent Seiler, Carl Wente.
Mayor, council members, staff, in the immortal words of Councilman Spadowski, this stinks. One of the things the consultant who put it up there, it really at the last minute I had to put a card in. Because one thing that I think as a council and as a community we're trying not to do is group like people together. We want Livermore to be Livermore. And for that screen to come up and to sit there and say, let's start grouping like people together because they have common interest. I think we all have one common interest, which is Livermore. I don't care if you're in Springtown or if you're out in the Grove. Everybody's got the same concerns for the community here. So the gentleman earlier, Kyle, had mentioned there's some software. One thing I would ask is if it's possible, consultants will do their job. I've done technology for over 25 years, and I've consulted. And when people say I need numbers, I make the numbers work. I'd like to see one of these open source tools used to counterbalance what is coming up with what the consultants come up with, to see if there's any difference or if it's better. So I would ask that as we're going through this process, that at least the council staff would consider maybe looking at an alternative source with the data, because your outcome is only going to be as good as the data that you put in. If you've got garbage going in, you're going to get garbage coming out. So making sure we have good data going in to help facilitate this would be great. I don't know how we can validate it since we're dealing with 2010 information and where it's coming from. So I just ask that you consider an alternative just as a balance, and if you could, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seiler. And finally, Carl Wente.
Mr. Mayor, council, staff. Kyle Dickerson, I believe that's your name. You said a lot of things very well. I support and agree with what you said. And do this well. Do this well. Good government. It's a process. It ain't broke. Livermore's awesome. Yeah, there's room for improvement. It's an inevitability and it's coming. Last time when it was brought to the agenda, I said, I don't think this is the right time for it. Litigation is going to force us there. We want to control our destiny as opposed to have to pay the legal fees and go, do this well, do this well, do this well, right? Gerrymandering in the future, setting it up so it's fair, public getting involved. Anybody that's out there on video, be involved in this process because Livermore will be affected and defined by this process. Right, it pains me a little bit to think that there's horse trading going up with the council because someone wants something up in that district, so they're going to say, okay, you vote with me on this, it goes. That might come. On some level, are we a homogenous? No, we're diverse. Celebrate diversity. Now, my father is a 65-year-old white male, and let's be honest, that the council is too. Some over, some under, I don't know your ages. A drive towards diversity, right? I love 65-year-old white males because my dad's my superhero and has been. I love him. So I love 65-year-old white males. Having some diversity up there is a good thing all the way through government. So do this well, do this well, do this well. Every software tool that we have, every good consultant that's been through, read your resume, read what's been through, like, do this well. And I know you embrace that. I know you as staff embrace that. It's like, sit down, son. We're going to do it well. We believe in doing it well. Do it well. This is critical. For those that it ain't broke, it's an inevitability. We got to go here. I think at this point in life, I'd rather not. I want to unify, not divide. That said, it's coming. Evan, I'll take my answer offline. Like a new term came up. What's a precinct? I looked up precinct online at Webster's, and it said a district. Now we're right back. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring that back to the council. Comments, questions from the council? Councilmember Carling.
So there's a couple of folks that brought up open source software. What software do you use? Is it yours or somebody else's or what?
So I use a program called Maptitude. It's by a company called Caliper. It is not an open source product. The products that are used are all using the same data set, which is one of the questions. This is all public data that produced by the U.S. Census Bureau that is available for anybody to download. So there's nothing in this data set that's proprietary or secret. It's just how are you actually manipulating around. The tools that are referred to, and including this software, a lot of tools have automatic redistricting tools. Those tend to well, there are two parts. One is you have to tell the automatic thing what you want it to do. So what is the priority of it? Do you want it to draw compact districts? Do you want it to not cross this geography? You have to give it instructions, otherwise it's going to draw a lot of squares. So you have to, so no computer is just going to do things without you giving it some parameters to it.
And that doesn't matter whether it's open source or the software
exactly.
you're using, right?
Correct. So that's where this process is still important in identifying priorities, no matter how you're doing it. Because an example would be from the presentation where I had the map that looked very pretty. It was the 4 squares. But if you imagine the community of interest, that was important to keep whole in the middle, being divided into 4 different districts. A computer might do that unless you tell it or you tell me. That's something that needs to be kept whole because it's not going to know that otherwise.
So where's the balance between community of interest versus just taking the data and dividing it into 4 and getting as close to? I mean, that seemed to be one of the issues that Mr. Dickerson brought up. I mean, he's advocating just looking at the data, and my question that came to my mind was, well, okay, well, how do we incorporate community of interest into that discussion?
It is a balancing act for this council. It is a balancing act between these criteria. So as an example, when you get to giving direction for next time when I'm going to draw multiple maps for you to consider, you could say, I want to see a map that focuses entirely on compactness, draws the most compact districts you can and ignores everything else, and compare that to a district that looks at some of these community of interest issues. So I understand how those would differ in how the city is represented and divided. So those are the kinds of things that this council needs to provide direction, because I am very much a tool for the community in this process.
So you used a word that I don't quite understand in this context, and that's compact. I mean, you could take the square miles that we have here and divide by 4, and it doesn't matter it's not going to be more or less compact. It's going to be that number, whatever the square miles is divided by 4, or 81,000 divided by 4. How are either of those more or less compact?
So you identified a problem, and if you really wanted to learn about redistricting, there are very many long academic memos about this, with various academics proposing various ways of measuring compactness. They can vary from measuring the outside boundaries of the district to see how many miles are around your district, to how closely are you to the geographic center of the population. There are a lot of different tools. The best way from a human understanding of this is the sight test of, does this district look normal, or does it look like there's something? Is it a district boundary that looks like it's inviting a question about whether gerrymandering is occurring, using that term loosely?
Mm-hmm.
And if there is a reason why that boundary is not compact, there may be a justifiable reason why that district isn't compact. The example I would cite from your city, and I'll bring it up on the map, would be whoops, I have the wrong one. Trying again. Would be your general plan area, where if you look, the light yellow area here is your downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Your downtown is not particularly compact. It's
No.
stretched out.
Right.
So that would be a place where, again, the council would be providing direction in that area. Is it more important for that to be compact, or is it more important for that area to be kept whole?
Oh, I see. Okay. Let's see, there was a couple of other folks that mentioned, why are we doing this? I think it's been clear that if we don't do it, it's going to cost the city a whole lot of money. And I think discretion in this case is the better part of valor in terms of the cost to us as a city. Other cities have tried, and I think Mr. Alcala can speak to this. I think other cities have tried to fight this, and I think Palmdale's maybe the best example, where it costs them many millions of dollars in legal fees.
That is true. The City of Palmdale and the City of Modesto have chosen to litigate the issue of whether this particular law, the CVRA, is indeed constitutional. In both those situations, the cities expended significant economic resources to defend and answer that question. The question was answered by the court. Yes, this is constitutional. And at the end of that, after spending the money litigating it, they still needed to move to district elections.
Yep.
I think there's one other important point, is not only does it cost you money, but the amount of control and discretion you have, you lose a lot, is my understanding, if you fight and you don't win the battle. And no one has won the battle, right?
Correct. So no city has successfully challenged this particular legislation, and you're correct. The CVRA has created this safe harbor opportunity for the city to control its destiny and to go through this process. If we don't conclude this process within that time frame, the proponent has the opportunity to file a formal lawsuit against the city, in which case the judge will then become part of the decision-making process.
So I think we get back to what Mr. Wente emphasized, and some of the others as well, and what I actually said the last time. It's really important that we do this well. And if we start kicking and screaming, we're not going to end up doing it well, and we'll lose the opportunity to do it well. And we'll have others do it to us. So it's very important that we, in my mind, that we just kind of get on with it. But I also understand there's a loss here for a lot of people who are comfortable with what is. And I don't know if I can mention this. I'll mention this now, and I don't know what the right time. It matters initiated. But some of the comments that were made last time were, especially at the council level and one was referenced about this stinks. And it was also pointed out by some of the other council members that what was really the problem, and I think Councilmember Coomer mentioned it, is that he would hate to be sitting downtown and have someone come up and ask him a question or ask for help with respect to an issue, and that the first thing that he would have to ask is, well, where are you from? And if it's not in his district, then therefore he would tell him, well, go see so-and-so. So that was a concern. And I think, and the mayor also read a fairly eloquent passage about the need for people who are elected to represent the whole and not a district. And so what I would like to suggest here, because there will be a lot of concern about how painful this is and how it's the wrong thing to do and a lot of that, but as best I can understand from the conversation we've just had and from earlier ones, we don't have any choice. So now, how do we do it well? So the first thing we do it well is that we think carefully about what are the factors that would allow us to do this, and we look at the various choices. And I think that the most important thing is that it's done in a very open manner and that everyone has a chance to see what's going on. There's no closed-door deals by whomever, the politicians, to get this done. Now, if you look at the national level and you look at the maps, you can pretty well tell they're not compact, right? I mean, you can tell, right? You can see that. So I think that strikes me as a very good criteria, the compactness, because that means that you're not gerrymandering. You're not trying to work some agenda, right? So there's that. But so there's a whole lot of ways that we're going to think through this, and there's mathematics to measure the compactness, I'm sure. But the other thing that I'd like to suggest here that we work concurrently is that fundamentally how the representatives who are eventually elected think and help govern the city is driven by the norms and values that we set. And so we have the opportunity, I think, not only to talk about how we're going to do the mathematics or whatever, dividing this thing up, but it's very important that we think now about those norms and values. So, for instance, there is no law that says if we go to districts that the person voted in from a district has to only think about that district. That's a choice that the city and the council makes. So we don't have to go down the path of what everybody is worried about. We don't have to. Now, there may be human nature that'll take you there, but I firmly believe that the more open we are with what we're doing, and the more that we and our successors think about these norms and values and set the rules in place as to how we're going to behave up here, that's extremely important. So I would ask that as the community goes through and thinking about the various communities of interest, that we also begin to be extremely clear about our rules and how we govern ourselves. So I would ask, and it's under matters initiated or whatever, is that that the staff begin to think about what are the appropriate rules in our norms and values that we want to ascribe to. Now, it's true that future council members might change it, and then I might say, well, maybe we have a chance to have a ballot initiative so it's not at the discretion of the council in the future. So just some of these things to think about. So in addition to the mechanics of this, I think we have to think about our desired behaviors as a community. And we don't have to be divided. It's a choice. And so I think that the more we set the rules up to be unified, the better off we are. So I don't know if I can ask now for others to nod heads and say, let's begin to, in addition to this, think about the rules. Or I can wait until matters initiated at the end. But I don't think the rest of you can, I don't know if I would ask the attorney, I don't think we can discuss what I'm saying.
No, you can't discuss it, but you can give direction for staff to return with something at a future date on this particular issue, if you're so inclined.
So can I get a couple more heads?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if I could just provide a little bit of context as well. In January, this coming January, we will be revisiting our council norms and values. We do evaluate those every 2 years. We last adopted those on January 26th, 2017. So that is coming up very soon.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm just thinking in advance of that, and I think this is traumatic, right? A lot of problems here that a lot of people have problems with this, and I think we need to, as a community, work this through very consciously, and not just think that the world has come to an end, and I'm more of a, thinking of more of an optimist, that we can set up the right set of rules so that we, in effect, do well. We not only get the right boundaries, but we know how to operate them properly.
Yeah, you know what? I'll give my grudging remarks right out of the gate. I'm not aware of a single at-large city that has ever run across a gerrymandering problem. That's just one of those things that we don't have. We have a population that tends to vote in many directions, which also indicates that we don't all think with one mind, and that offends me, quite honestly. The thought that because I am not of a certain skin color, religion, any other background, that I can't understand somebody else's issues, problems, and that to me is offensive. It's offensive that this law firm took it upon itself to enforce this law and has the potential to cost us a lot of money. But we can't gerrymander what we have now. So in that regard, we're a half step ahead as we stand. Grudgingly, I will watch this move forward. I will pay close attention to where these things are drawn and the arguments made for each district. I think you find that when united by the same common features and problems and things that we have to learn a little bit from each other about how to get along. And it's not really hard. I mean, the amount of people who thought I shouldn't be on top of a 14,000-foot mountain in a wheelchair is a lot. Anybody else who was up there anyway. But who represents me? How far do we break down our differences, or do we try and unite our similarities? And I think that's the part that is most offensive about this whole process. I would rather see that we concentrate on what are our common goals, our common objectives, how do we achieve them, and everybody stays represented. I've just not had any information in my email or by phone to the contrary that is happening right now. And so I'll be the curmudgeon here, and probably for longer than I should. But I'm still okay with what works right now. We're only 90,000 people. We aren't 750,000 people, where it's obvious that there has to be some distinction. But that being said, I will await our next meeting because I'm looking forward to hearing more. But I'll tell you, I'll throw this back at you. The potential for gerrymandering as it stands is zero right now.
A couple of questions that came up during the public hearing. So when I was looking at the slices, I just presumed that those slices incorporated the precincts. Is that the case, or is this a whole nother arbitrary set of boundaries?
So no, they don't incorporate the precincts, and no, they are not arbitrary. So what they are based on is those census block groups that I discussed earlier.
Right.
The issue is because the census block groups don't follow your city geography, they'll dip in and out of the city. One census block group, for example, actually has 3 separate pieces of the city that are non-contiguous. So just saying draw by the census block groups would limit the ability of the public to provide input, because all 3 of those census block groups would have to be together because they're one big chunk. So the slices are just taking those census block groups and breaking them up. So if they're non-contiguous, for example, they are treated as separate pieces so as to give more flexibility to the members of the public to provide constructive feedback to the council. For purposes of the council drawing lines, you can actually, and if members of the public wanted to use other tools, you can go down to a much smaller granular level of those census block groups, those 1,800 little pieces. What we found in experience with other geographies is if you throw all 1,800 pieces at people, nobody submits plans because it's just too much information. So we try to give tools that allow the members of the public to easily provide feedback to council.
Because I think it's a very important point, because that literally would be dividing up a neighborhood. And if you had one neighborhood that is divided because the slice doesn't represent or isn't contiguous with the precinct boundaries. I think that is actually the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. So I think that how this begins to materialize needs to incorporate the precinct boundaries as well. I'm not sure how all that gets sliced into the slices, but I think that's important. I'm less concerned about gerrymandering because the council and the mayor are nonpartisan. So what we stand for here is good governance. We're not up here because we're Democrat or Republican. So it's hard to find that gerrymander where you're going to track the people that just want good government and the ones that don't, because I think we all stand for good governance, and that's what motivates all of us up here. Another thing that concerns me is the city districts versus if someday some other agency has to go to districts, whether it's the school district, park district. The park district boundaries are not contiguous with the city districts. So how does that sort of morph and get into all of this this mess? So these are things that I'm sure that we're going to be talking about later, but these, I think it's important that we consider all of these because this is going to be with us for a while.
2 points. 3 points, I guess. One, to your earlier question about precincts, that is the kind of thing that the council could provide direction, that to the extent practicable, following existing precinct boundaries. That would be something you could provide direction for me to look at on the theory that those precinct boundaries are in some ways conforming to your community of interest boundaries. So that's something you could do. Similarly, if you have overlapping jurisdictions, such as a park district, to say that is a fair representation of some of the communities in our community, so look at those overlapping jurisdiction boundaries. Again, that's something that you could provide direction to and something I would then implement. To your last point about living with this for a while, just again, keep in mind you're going to be living with these boundaries for 2 years and then doing this all over again.
And another significant cost. Another thing I thought was really interesting is looking at the letter that required this whole process against our will. I thought it was talking about disenfranchised, protected communities. And of course, the reference that they made was for a particular nationality. And I thought it was interesting that it actually says the districts shall not be drawn with race as a predominant factor, and yet that is precisely what brings us here, is because that protected class was perceived to not be represented. So we could go through this whole district exercise and really end up in the exact same place.
So, and I'll defer to council if they wanted to.
So in that particular aspect, with regard to the California Voting Rights Act, once the City Council makes the transition to district elections, that argument in the letter you did receive will not come back again. It only applies to at-large elections. So that's your dilemmas. Was that the basis to present that letter to you? Yes, and I think you've identified a little bit of a disconnect between the impetus and the remedy. The remedy is making that transition to district-based elections, finding these communities of interest, in which case the CVRA would no longer apply. And as Mr. Wagaman had mentioned previously, the FVRA, looks like those factors would not be at play here in Livermore, which I think goes to the point you were trying to make.
All right. Okay, so with that, any further discussion on where we are on this? Okay, with that, this is the first of the hearings, so there's no action to be taken. We'll just be bringing this up to the next hearing.
That is correct.
Okay, but again, I think it's important to have the boundaries of the districts coincide with the boundaries of the precincts, where those ultimate boundaries end up, Okay, let's go for, let's take a quick look here. Okay, recognizing the, let's see, hang on just a second here. Yeah, okay, so on to 601. Just, let's see, hang on a second here. Okay, 601 should be quick. Because everybody's in favor of it, I think. Or I say it's not really controversial.
How do you know that?
Yeah, it's not controversial. Yeah, but we can make it that way, can't we? Okay, this will be quick, and move on to all right, 6.01. Fran Reisner, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight for your consideration is the approval of an exclusive negotiating rights agreement with Satellite Affordable Housing Associates and Interfaith Housing to develop the approximately 3.6-acre city-owned property on Pacific Avenue adjoining the Civic Center complex. In January, as part of the direction provided by Council to execute components of the downtown plan, City Council instructed staff to undertake a process to identify a developer for the site on Pacific Avenue with the purpose of developing a senior housing project that could be counted towards a significant portion of the city's affordable housing obligation on the downtown site. The Pacific Avenue site was identified and made available with the support and collaboration of the Livermore Stockmen's Association. In April, staff issued a request for qualification from developers who could develop a project that includes 100 to 140 units of rental housing that is affordable to seniors with very low incomes, includes a preference for seniors who are veterans and who may have disabilities or special needs, and creates an innovative development plan that includes services and programming to support very low-income seniors. Staff received 4 submittals from nonprofit affordable housing developers, including Eden Housing, Community Housing Works, First Community Housing, and the team of Satellite Affordable Housing Associates, referred to as SAHA, and Interfaith Housing. Staff reviewed the qualifications of these firms based on their demonstrated ability to develop, own, and manage similar types of affordable housing, including housing for veterans and seniors, their ability to achieve a high-quality project that maximizes the site's characteristics and satisfies the city's goals, and their access to typical affordable housing financing and experience financing similar projects within the high-cost conditions of Alameda County and the Bay Area. The proposals were ranked and evaluated against these criteria, and interviews were conducted. Based on this evaluation process, staff recommends City Council select the development team of SAHA and Interfaith Housing to engage into formal discussions and the negotiation of a future disposition and development agreement for the site. The development partnership would capitalize on the development capability of SAHA and Interfaith's longstanding experience in providing senior housing in Livermore. SAHA and Interfaith Housing each have existing projects in Livermore and in all own and manage a combined 237 units at 4 properties serving both seniors and families. For this site, SAHA and Interfaith have proposed to develop a village-like concept, which incorporates Interfaith's neighboring senior properties, including Arbor Vista and Vineyard Village. This could maximize the use of the site and facilitate some innovative coordination of design and shared programming opportunities between all of the properties. So for your consideration is an exclusive negotiating rights agreement that would allow the city to begin discussions with SAHA and Interfaith. If approved, this agreement would provide up to 12 months for the parties to negotiate a development agreement that would provide for a more defined project scope, timeline, and financing plan, including the terms of the land dedication by the city and any additional financing needed to develop the projects. During the negotiating period, we anticipate that these we will also work with the developer to coordinate on the general plan amendment and zoning changes that will be needed in order to develop the site as housing. And these changes are anticipated to be complete by the end of 2018. Staff anticipates that a disposition and development agreement would come to council for your consideration thereafter. And this completes staff's quick presentation, and we are available to answer any questions that you have.
Questions for staff at this point? Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll open the public comment period. I have 2 cards, Don Argula and Connie Copps.
Good evening. Mayor, council members, Dawn Argula, CEO of the Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce, representing over 500 businesses and organizations in the Livermore Valley. As the mayor said, for all the reasons outlined by the staff, the Chamber of Commerce wholeheartedly supports the staff recommendation for this. And we want to thank you and the Stockmen's Association for your partnership and seeing that we're at this juncture now with this project and with this team that has been selected. So yes, we do support this, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Connie Copps?
Hi, I really think these are wonderful organizations. They do a lot for the community. I do have some concerns. I'm glad to see there were RFPs because I know that interfaith housing was, kind of a favorite of Stockman's Rodeo. And in the beginning, they were, going back and forth with, ideas. And I'm glad that you did open it up to other people as well. And my reasons are against the exclusive negotiating rights agreement. Sometimes I think that Livermore isn't competitive enough in a lot of ways. And again, nothing against these great organizations. They do a lot, and I don't know who could shine a candle to them. But if people could, we got to see it, because I'm all for friendly competition, and you should be too. Nothing against everybody being the same age out there. I can see that. But who are we passing our torches to? When you get into these organizations that are picked and that, nothing against them, again, but exclusive negotiating rights, I think it's important in a lot of ways because I know there's time and expense put on that. But look back at the process and make sure it was fair because we've got a lot of kids that graduate from college that look for jobs that are starting nonprofits or want a chance to start a nonprofit. And I'm not saying the process wasn't fair because I didn't look at it, and I'm glad to hear there were there was a request for proposals. But I think in past, I really have seen it where I do think Livermore has been anti-competitive in some ways, and I don't mean that it's you have your favorites. I have my favorites, but I really would like to see more objectivity. My heart just sank at the last meeting when a council member said, yeah, well, we took care of Springtown. I didn't like the tone with that. And as far as districting, don't let Springtown have a voice all of its own. I mean, let's celebrate diversity. Let's have a districting, but we need to get on board with competition a little bit better. Nothing against safety nets for people that just can't compete, but I think we'll see our economy grow if we give chances to more people to get in the arena. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Copps. Carl Winty.
I want to celebrate the process of good government. Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing me to speak. Council, thank you for allowing me to speak. Staff, thank you for what you do. Process, Connie Copps, the process happened, and we got to get to the point. The RFQs are out there. People step forward that they want to. We have that process in place. And now to have an ENRA, you've got to have some ability to negotiate and do your job, right? So, I mean, the process worked and it's there. City clerk, your team, you have to answer. Someone walks up to your desk, seems to me by law, you have to take care of them. I don't know if there's a statute that says that, but when your predecessor, when I made a joke, she said, well, that's going to be 10 cents a page to copy this. And I said, oh, by what statute is that where you're defining the price? And she listed off exactly what it was that defines that. And I was humbled. I just ate my humble pie, and I said, right on. They will take care of you. They will ask the questions. They will go through the process to see how we got there. So it was a process. We do have a competitive nature there. You enter an ENRA so you can be competitive, right? If it's just a public rodeo that goes out there. So celebrate the process. We have two good organizations. We're moving forward. Stockmen's Association, anybody that's out there, thank you for bringing us forward. The city of Livermore waited a long time to get that park, which is going in. It's going to a better location for open space in our beautiful downtown. The process works. Good government. Thank you all for what you do.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period. If I could ask the city attorney just comment on what actually goes on during the ENRA, the Exclusive Negotiating Rights Agreement, as opposed to the RFQ, which actually is the competitive process.
So the ENRA itself is you selected a partner to work with, and you actually get down to the brass tacks of describing a project. There will be money expended both and resources by both the city and the individual will be partnering with, and that's why we have that security that these people know that they can expend these funds and resources with the understanding that the city is not going to turn around and pitch that project to somebody else. It gives us that security to work through some of the meat and potatoes of the particular project and return to you with an ultimate project for disposition.
Okay, and this is one of the reasons you want somebody that has a proven track record, because if you're talking about spending real dollars here, you want someone that has a proven track record and they've done this before.
That was your review process that staff underwent to evaluate the qualifications of the particular applicants, their ability to perform, and that's why they came with you with a recommendation today for this particular group.
And I think that's one of the things that we've seen is that Saha operates a project here in Livermore, and Interfaith Housing has over 200 housing units that they manage and own here in Livermore, and that's been a phenomenal success. So with that, further comments from the council?
Well, I had a question. Are either of the any parties representing those organizations here, and are they prepared to say anything?
We do have representatives from both Saha and Interfaith Housing in attendance.
So if they want to say something, I'd like to hear it.
Okay. We would invite them up. I see Eve Stewart with Satellite Affordable Housing heading up to the lectern.
Hi, good evening. My name is Eve Stewart. I'm the real estate director with Saha, and we are delighted to be recommended to carry forth this vision for the Pacific Avenue site. We've known the City of Livermore staff and been part of the community since we completed Carmen Avenue in 2008, just at the end of the block, and we were very delighted to get to know Interfaith Housing last summer as they were starting to work through some of the details of this opportunity, and we're thinking ahead. So again, I want to thank you and congratulate you for this extremely creative solution that you found to accommodating the Stockmen's commitment to the Stockmen's Association, as well as creating a beautiful downtown and working through that process, and then also securing affordable housing for the community. Saha, we have been around since the 1960s, and we have developed over 65 communities that serve seniors and families, and we also have a lot of experience serving households with special needs. So thank you again, and I know Lanny with Interfaith Housing, she's the president of the board. She might want to come up and say a few words as well.
Thank you for your comments. Good evening, Ms. Thompson.
Good evening, members of the City Council. I'm Lanning Thompson. I'm the president of the board of Interfaith Housing. And I just want to thank you for considering us as developers of this property, which is right up the street, and want to speak to the need for this and Interfaith Housing's record in the community. We have actually 207. You were really close. One bedroom.
200.
Yeah, perfect. One bedroom apartments at our three communities, Arbor Vista, Vineyard Village, and Hillcrest Gardens. Right now, we have 1,590 applications for those 207 apartments. And while some of them may be duplications because some people wisely apply to all three at once, the minute they turn 62, which is the cutoff age, we know that at least 1,000 of them are individuals or couples who are waiting for an apartment. Our average wait time to get in one of those apartments is now over 5 years. So the need is very great, and again, we thank you for this opportunity to create more senior housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Councilmember Carling?
I'd just like to congratulate the staff for doing this so quickly. I'm impressed that some decisions made just a few short months ago, we have reached this point where we are entering into an ENRA with some very capable people that we're going to help with housing in a short while here in Livermore. So I can't thank you folks enough for all the good work you've done. I think it's been terrific.
Councilmember Coomer?
Just much appreciation for what Interfaith Housing does in town, as well as its teaming up with Saha right now. Sounds like a great opportunity for us for this to move forward. And again, with eternal thanks to the Stockmen for being drivers and making this happen, making sure that this is really going to be a real thing and not just what 6 months ago was a potential something, but we didn't know what, and it's all moving at a great rate and really going to pay off for some people in need right now.
Ms. Mayor?
Oh, I'd just like to, again, just recognize that it was Lanning Thompson who set the wheels in motion here, and because of interfaith housing and having projects on either side of the land at the end of the street here, recognized the potential. And then it was city staff who understood what the potential issues were. And then it was the Lanning Thompson put together the meeting with the Stockmen from which this all came about. So there was serendipity involved in just being able to put all the pieces together. I think it's fantastic. We did have the open opportunity for other people to bid on this. I'm personally pleased that the staff has recommended Interfaith, because that's where the idea originated, and we have the opportunity to leverage the existing properties there, and Saha's a great partner. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity. It obviously fulfills a great need. And I think the other thing to point out is when we were first talking about this, I think the range that we were thinking about was about 70, I believe. Now we're talking, what, double?
140.
Double that. And I would like to say that part of what enables that is, one, is being able to leverage those properties. But the other thing is that in dealing with the Stockmen's Association, when we were figuring out how to do this, they opened up a broader discussion. So that's part of what's in here. So I think it's a wonderful example of what we were talking about earlier, the community coming together for a common goal, and a lot of people participated, and we've got a great potential result here. We'll see how the negotiations work out, but I think that's the appropriate next step, and I would move that we go down that path.
And the Vice Mayor is being far too humble here. He was absolutely instrumental. Vice Mayor Warner was key to bringing all these elements together, along with Eric Urange's wonderful memory that remembered way back 56 years ago that this promise had been made. And you were the one that really brought all these pieces together. So you were the visionary behind that. And I just want to acknowledge that you're the one that came up with this, bringing all these pieces together. So my compliments to Vice Mayor Warner for really making this happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, before we get too deep, I thought I heard a motion. Is it
yes,
correct?
you did hear a motion, but I wanted
to second that.
Over. Okay, it's moved by Vice Mayor Warner, seconded by Councilmember Coomber. Is there any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed unanimously. Looking forward to this project. Thank you very much for your time and effort on this. Thank you. Okay, so We are at 9 o'clock. So we're going to take a real quick break, and then we're going to go into the main event, which is the healthcare. I would have taken this sooner, but we have to do all the public hearings first, and this is a matter for consideration. So, saw you guys there. Couldn't make the procedural change, but we'll have you guys back here shortly. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to the July 23rd meeting of the Livermore City Council. We're on to round two. This is the 6.02, which is the consideration of Elections Code Section 9212 report regarding local regulation of healthcare service costs initiative petition. So we'll bring that back for the staff presentation. Mr. Alessio.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. On June 25th, the City Council accepted the City Clerk's certification that local regulation of healthcare service costs initiative petition contained a sufficient number of signatures to qualify for the ballot. At the June 20th meeting, the Council also directed the preparation of an information report pursuant to Elections Code Section 9212 to evaluate the effects of the proposed initiative, including potential fiscal impacts on the community's ability to attract and retain businesses and employment, and the impact on the community's ability to access health care in Livermore. So this evening, you have two options. You can adopt the initiative and have it become effective immediately, or you can have it placed on the ballot for November. In the event that you place it on the ballot for November, there will be the need to appoint folks to write the direct argument and rebuttal argument for the initiative. So tonight, the 92 report has been prepared and presented to you. Some of the highlights of the report are the report contains a description of the regulatory program proposed by the initiative. It has a tentative list of 211 Livermore businesses called providers, which may be covered by the initiative, and provides examples of how the providers might be affected. Some of these impacts include additional record-keeping burden, impose a variety of new costs, complicate long-term planning in terms of services, capacity, acquisition of equipment, construction, capital financing, and potentially incentivizes providers to refuse to treat patients it expects to be costly. The report also discusses the likely direct fiscal impacts on the city, as well as the wider impact on the local economy and quality of life issues for the residents. So in taking a look at this, as you are aware, did you get a lot of feedback? Is there? All right. Is that better? That is better. All right. Cool. Move that aside. All right. As you're aware, there's a likelihood of continued litigation. There's already been several pieces of litigation on this initiative, and it is currently being litigated. There's an estimated cost between $750,000 to $1 million for the implementation and startup costs. It has ongoing costs of approximately $1.9 million annually to administer and enforce the initiative. There's no adequate, stable funding mechanism provided by the initiative to address the operational costs. Implementing and administering the program will likely need to be offset through cutting of other city services or increasing city revenues, or a combination of the both. Providers exiting the Livermore market unless they can relocate nearby but outside of Livermore. New providers being reluctant to enter the Livermore market. It also is the impact on the communities in terms of healthcare access and how much changes, if they do occur, could affect the reputation of the community and its economy. And that's a summary of the report.
Very good. Any questions for staff at this point? Okay, move on to the public hearing. I've got somewhere around 15 cards. So ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And with that, we will start with Lubna Hassanain, John Stein, and Rosalie Garcia Bernal. Ms. Hassanein?
Good evening, honorable members of the City Council. My name is Dr. Lubna Hassanein. I'm president-elect of the Alameda Contra Costa Medical Association, which represents 4,200 physicians practicing in Livermore and the surrounding East Bay. I'm also a practicing pediatrician with Kaiser Permanente. The ACCMA is strongly opposed to this initiative. This is absolutely the wrong way to address the problem of rising costs. Sadly, the brunt of this initiative will not be felt by the physicians and other providers it targets. It will instead be felt by our patients and the residents of Livermore. This initiative will force providers to relocate out of Livermore. Physicians who are close to retirement may speed up their plans, and it will be virtually impossible to recruit any new providers into the community. The consequence will be reduced access to quality care for Livermore residents. This initiative also adds an unnecessary layer of bureaucracy, which your excellent staff analyzed, so I won't go much into it. So, medical services are already highly regulated at the state and federal levels. This initiative would add more bureaucracy that the city cannot afford. We are also concerned about the overly simplistic and leading nature of the ballot question. We support amending the ballot question to more accurately reflect the nature of the proposal. As physicians, our primary concern is the betterment of our patients. We need to address the cost of care in a manner that preserves access and quality of care. This proposal would do the exact opposite. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Stein and Rosalie Garcia Bernal.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. I urge you not adopt this, but put it on the ballot. My main concern is the roughly $2 million a year of ongoing cost to set up the regulations, monitor them, and enforce them. It makes no sense to do it at this level. I mean, it's too granular. I mean, it's just like a city trying to put a sales tax on when all the neighboring cities don't have a sales tax. You just lose business. And I think the city needs the funds for a whole lot of much better uses, including the ongoing increases in pension benefit costs and deferred maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Rosalie Garcia Bernal, Dale Kay, Shake Sulikian.
Good evening. My name is Rosalie Garcia Bernal. I am a healthcare worker. My father-in-law was a Stanford patient. He picked Stanford only because he wanted the best healthcare he can get. He was a retired Pacific Railroad employee, also Local 3. With his health insurance, he could have picked anything, but he decided on Stanford. He was admitted last November at Stanford Hospital and was in and out of the hospital for 6 weeks. And every time he came down with some sort of infection. I spent several nights there with him at Stanford and noticed that every time he needed to use the restroom, there were short staff and couldn't get into him in time. Kind of upset. I get a little emotional because he passed away at the end of December. I would call the call light so they come and help him urinate, give him a bedpan, and every time they'd get there too late, so he'd soil himself. It'd take 40 minutes for someone to come and clean him up. So I myself in the healthcare industry, I thought, well, you're my father-in-law, I'll do it for you so you don't have to wait. So he was a little bit embarrassed, and as a Latino male, his dignity was out the door. So I ended up helping him for the 4 nights I was there with him, helping him with the urinal, the bedpan, and gave him the assistant he needed because Stanford was so short-staffed. I support this initiative and urge you to vote yes on this in November. It will put patient care first and all Stanford health care facilities, including Valley Healthcare Hospital in Livermore. Thank you. And he passed away at Christmas. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bernal. Dale Kay, Shake Sulikian, and Brent Seiler.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Dale Kay with the Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group. I did speak to this at our June meeting, and at that point I was talking from a personal point of view because I was a patient at Valley Care Stanford, where I know that my life was saved. I had a condition. My brothers both didn't make it. It's a genetic thing. I got the most amazing care, and I don't think that if I had gone anywhere else or had the proximity that we have living in Livermore and Pleasanton, that I would have been here tonight. So I'm very grateful for that amazing care. But as a business group, I want to say we also have a perspective that we think that this is hazardous both for our healthcare providers and the business community. When one reads the fine print, it becomes clear that the measure is nothing more than an attack on our local health care and more than 200 businesses that provide medical services within Livermore city limits. Its provisions would starve health care services and endanger community health programs, including community benefit program like low-cost screening, education and wellness classes, and other preventative care. We should be working to expand these services, not cut them back. The UHW initiative does not discriminate. It will harm large providers as well. Local doctors, dentists, and specialty practices will all be impacted. We all will be impacted, actually. Many may be forced to relocate, and we all know this is just not good for Livermore. Other speakers will talk to what it does to the city. Your staff did a very good job on explaining how this initiative asks the City of Livermore to become a healthcare regulatory and enforcement agency at a local cost of nearly $2 million annually, and it's the worst kind of unfunded mandate as far as we're concerned because it threatens people's access to life-caring care, squanders precious taxpayer resources, and puts other city services at risk for cutbacks and eliminations. So you couldn't have a worse scenario. So on behalf of the Livermore business community, I urge the city to oppose this harmful and misleading initiative. I want you to know that Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group, which represents businesses in Livermore and throughout the Tri-Valley, will stand with you. And together we can send a very clear message that this is a community that will never play politics with a person's right to receive quality medical care in the community where they live. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kay. Shake Sulikian, Brent Seiler, Doug Jones.
Good evening. My name is Shake Sulikian, and I'm a Livermore resident who is worried about the initiative's impact on my city. There are many others concerned about this initiative. The executive director of Southern Alameda County Dental Society unfortunately had another commitment and could not attend this evening. The Southern Alameda County Dental Society represents over 650 member dentists in Alameda County. Of those, more than 60 practice and live in Livermore. A letter was submitted to the council, and I will be reading the letter so that you can consider the potential impact to dentists this evening. Reading from the letter. As executive director of the Southern Alameda County Dental Society, I'm writing to raise significant concerns about the SEIU UHW-sponsored Livermore Accountable and Affordable Healthcare Initiative, Agenda Item 6.02. The Dental Society was founded in 1958, and our members practice in Livermore, Pleasanton, and 9 other nearby cities. According to the City of Livermore's recently completed Section 9212 information report on the initiative, 65 dental providers and 4 dental laboratories have been identified as being affected by the initiative. The report raises troubling conclusions about the impact to the dentists providing dental care in this community. The report identifies burdensome record-keeping and the imposition of new costs. Additionally, it states that the initiative would complicate long-term planning in terms of services, capacity, acquisition of equipment, and capital spending. I'm also concerned about the report's described implications for patients, that providers will be incentivized to refuse to treat patients expected to be costly, and that providers who do not relocate are likely to cut costs in a manner that will lessen access and compromise the quality of patient care. By increasing costs and reducing revenue, a likely outcome of this initiative would be dentists who exit the Livermore market, and new dentists will be reluctant to enter. Dentists' ability to run a viable dental practice should not be threatened based on their Livermore Street address. What's worse, such an outcome would unfavorably punish Livermore residents who would lose access to dental services. Access to quality health care is important to the health and well-being of Livermore. While the Dental Society will be taking a formal position on the initiative later this summer, I am sending this letter now so that the City Council will be aware of the dental community's significant concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brent Seiler, Doug Jones, Don Argula.
Mayor, Councilman, staff. Think I said this before, and I'm going to kind of regurgitate for a second. My wife had stage 4 ovarian cancer. And I don't care how much profit these hospitals make, if it gives me one more day with her, it's worth every penny that I've paid into Kaiser. This is something that it's going to be hard not to get it on the ballot. I believe, Jason, I've sent some information to you. Mayor, I've sent some information to you. It goes beyond now, you know, the level of health care that my wife has received. Luckily, she's in remission. She's had to do 2 rounds of chemo. And we know eventually ovarian cancer will take her life. That's just the reality that we have to face. But now when we start looking at the burden that it puts on the community, if it wasn't for the local doctor at Kaiser here in Livermore, it wouldn't have been detected. I could have lost her. And I'm sure people from Stamford can tell you the same stories. We need these facilities in our community, and the SEIU is driving it out. I don't like it. I don't like them. And I'll make it very blunt. When you go beyond this and you start looking from a regulatory standpoint, you know, there is a heavy burden that's going to be put on the city, not only from what you have to do, but from the technical aspects. So I'm the technology guy that has to build the systems that regulatory says they need to be able to manage. And the amount of money that we have to invest just in regulatory and the segregation of duties that we have to have. So no longer can someone in a department just have access to your system. It's got to be segregated. They have to have training in HIPAA. You know, there's going to be a lot more training that you've got to do, a lot more. You're going to be a covered entity, possibly. You have to worry about data breaches. So are all of the system cities up to the standard that could prevent a data breach? Because if that breach happens, the city's going to get sued. If I want to know who's touched my information within the city, in a reasonable amount of time, you have to provide me answers to that. Who's looked at my data? Who's touched it? When did they touch it? That's my right under the HIPAA. So, you know, one thing I haven't seen is a broad communication out to the community why this is bad. I'm sure staff and the council will get to that. But much like Councilman Warner has said, we don't need to waste time on this. It's a no-brainer. We need to communicate this out to the community. We need to make them aware of how to vote on this, because a lot of people don't understand. They think it's, you know, it's going to lower my health cost. It's really not. So I would just ask that, you know, if someone could speak on how we're going to communicate this out to the community to enforce the right vote, both to help keep Stamford, Kaiser, the dental offices here in Livermore. I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Seiler. Doug Jones, Don Argula, Connie Copps.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thank you for hearing from us. We ask that you adopt the resolution which places this initiative on the ballot, and we also ask that you honor and respect your voters and taxpayers by rejecting the expense of a subcommittee which would be formed to place a thumb on the scales against the voters' expressed desire to improve healthcare quality and stop the extraction of excessive profits by major healthcare providers in town. Stanford Healthcare made over $74 million in operating margin in the first quarter of the 2018 fiscal year. That pencils out as the major provider of healthcare in town, on pace to make nearly $300 million in profit this year. A meaningful amount of their operating margin was made in Livermore. Yet the city is being made to speculate that one of the very most profitable hospital health systems in the United States would be forced to pull out health services if they were made to respond to Livermore residents and their desire for common sense healthcare regulations, which incentivize providers who may be out of compliance to increase their investments in staffing levels and other methods to improve the quality of care, as specifically mentioned in the initiative. We've received testimony at this council meeting, as we received in the last council meeting, that Livermore has world-class healthcare with essentially zero problems with healthcare prices, quality, and safety. Let the signatures from nearly 8,000 Livermore residents who are registered voters testify to their substantial disagreement with these claims that Livermore is a healthcare paradise. I know that many voters in town have expressed complaints about expenditures in the city budget. An expenditure which has escalated by the city in recent years has been the cost for health insurance. These escalating healthcare costs are borne by the city and borne by the city's workforce in increased premium payments and co-payments. It is striking that the 9212 report entirely excludes discussions of the escalating cost of healthcare insurance to the city budget. It's also striking that the 9212 report does not take up an estimate of the health insurance savings which both the private and public sector may enjoy under this initiative. The city, the school district, businesses, individuals in town are paying more for their health insurance every year, increases which are almost always more than the cost or the rate of inflation. Everyone in the private and public sector also suffers physically and financially, and patients suffer needless injuries, infections, and other illnesses. How the initiative might impact care quality and safety is not seriously considered in the report. But please focus on the conclusion of the 9212 report. Finally, in the very last paragraph, we are told, if the program proves successful and results in healthcare cost savings without compromising access and quality, it would obviously have a positive impact on the community and would likely be replicated in other areas. Not only does city staff concede here that the city budget and city businesses may benefit from this initiative, city staff also concedes that a claim from providers that they might move out of town is made impossibly weak, because neighboring cities and their residents will impose similar regulations if Livermore responds to the demands of your voters and makes these regulations work. We thank you for considering our request here, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Don Argula, Connie Copps, Tom Marcel.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Don Argula, CEO of the Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce, representing more than 500 businesses and organizations in the Livermore Valley. I would like to thank you and the city staff for this report. It's very enlightening. It was what we had. There's no surprises in here, except it was very helpful to actually see a list of the providers that could potentially be impacted by this measure. This chamber urges you to not adopt this measure and let it go to the ballot. I would encourage you, if there are other ways that you can either amend this or just, prevent it from going to the ballot at all, that would be preferable. As you know, this measure is poorly conceived, poorly written, singles out one city in the Tri-Valley, putting Livermore at a disadvantage compared to its neighbors. It was developed with absolutely no input from healthcare industry or the healthcare-related businesses and organizations, or the healthcare insurance industry, or the city that is being charged with the responsibility to administer this regulation at an enormous cost to city taxpayers. It impacts not only at least the 211 businesses and organizations identified in the report, but it will have a ripple effect. It will, should we lose these organizations, these practitioners, the suppliers and services that support them would be affected. And then by extension also other services like restaurants and shops where those employees visit and they patronize. So we have major reservations about this. I know this is a very hard thing for you all. I mean, it has to go to the ballot. But we support our businesses, and we hope that regardless, whatever the outcome is in November, that you will remain close to your business community and monitor what's going on there and make any necessary adjustments as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Argula. Connie Copps, Tom Marcel, Denise Boulers.
Connie Copps, Tulip Way. I'm interested in this going to discussion, even if it does go to the ballot, which tonight I hope that you're hearing your community. They're asking to put this to the ballot so far. That it goes to a discussion. We have some good-hearted people on our staff, you know, and I can see where they want to try to keep costs down for their constituents, but it's really got to be written so that your constituency, your audience is hearing the facts. And please try to understand them yourself. This is so complicated. Hospitals write off so much. You know, we are good-hearted in Livermore. But if we need to make things fair across the board, like John Stein said, we can't single ourselves out. Be the leader, yes, maybe for discussion. You know, talk to your community, your Alameda County, Contra Costa County. Discuss the problems, discuss solutions, but you know, to potentially drive out our hospitals from this area. Think about it. Think about what we used to have in Livermore. Even as wonderful as the hospital is that Stanford runs, when we had a full-service hospital in Livermore, when it was Valley Care, nothing against Stanford, but you know, we had a hospital here. If you had a problem, you could get there. We can't disincentivize, you know, competition. We can't disincentivize our, you know, healthcare. People will move out, you know. So bring the discussions. Sit at the table with the people that are affected. Find better solutions. And if something goes on that ballot, make sure it's written so it's not loaded like Measure FF was. You know, Measure FF, when that went through, you know, it decided things in the verbiage, you know, that, you know, we couldn't escape. So when it does go to the ballot, and I hope you do decide on this, make sure there isn't a thumb on the scale. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Copps. Tom Marcel, Denise Boulers, and Kurt Kirschner.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and managers. Thank you for all you people do to make this city great. My name is Tom Marcel. I'm a private practice orthodontist here in town for 26 years, and I'm a resident here for that long as well. Livermore is on a roll right now. We are just on a roll, and I really feel that this initiative could really set us back. I think it will have a dramatic negative fiscal impact, which I don't need to go in any further. I think it's been pretty well outlined. But I really just want to comment on the disastrous effect it could have on the quality of care. And I'm just speaking for myself and the dental community here in town. If this comes to fruition, those that can move their practice out of town will do so immediately. You can come see me in my Tracy office or come see me in my Pleasanton office. For most, the exodus will be a lot slower. Their immediate probably choice to do is lower their costs, and our staff is probably our greatest cost. So probably the first thing that people will do is lay off staff members. So you can expect that office then to not be able to offer the services that they usually do. They'll also not be inputting their physical or updating their physical plant as readily. They won't be upgrading their services and technology and other things that make their offices state of the art. But perhaps the kind of the biggest fear is there will not be any new talented practitioners coming to town. Livermore will have a big black X on it. And what young practitioner, I'm not going to go set up a practice in that town because of this regulation. They can go in any other town in the East Bay and do much, much better. So I really feel that. And there will be a vacuum of corporate clinic type dental practices coming into town that are in a different mode that doesn't quite offer the quality of care that we've worked so hard to accomplish here. So just want to go on record for saying that, and yeah, I hope you can be very careful about any kind of facilitation of this measure. So thank you.
Dr. Marcel, thank you. Denise Brulers, Kurt Kirschner, Scott Gregerson.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and City staff. My name is Denise Boyers, and I'm Director of PR and Marketing for Stanford Healthcare Valley Care, and I'm also a Livermore resident. I'm here tonight as part of the coalition of healthcare providers and community leaders that oppose the UHW ballot initiative. This harmful and misguided ballot measure would put our ability to provide care in Livermore at jeopardy. We are here again tonight to ask the Livermore City Council to join us in standing up for local healthcare in this community. I'd like to emphasize a few points. The UHW initiative claims to limit costs, but the fine print reveals it has no provisions to reduce healthcare costs. It would require Livermore's hospital, medical clinics, doctors, dentists, and other providers to pay rebates that would primarily benefit for-profit, publicly traded, out-of-state insurers that do business in California. There is no requirement in the initiative that the rebates be passed back to insurers of California. Livermore is a great community with strong municipal leadership, but local government too will be severely impacted by the UHW measure. This initiative puts the city in a position where they would be required to regulate local hospital and all other healthcare providers within the city limits at approximately $1.9 million as per the 9212 report. The city will need to allocate taxpayer resources to gain the expertise and then enforce the law. This will be incredibly challenging, expensive, and unnecessary. On behalf of Valley Care, please oppose this harmful and dishonest initiative and ensure the ballot label is accurate and fair. Together, we can ensure Livermore healthcare providers can continue to deliver exceptional care to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Kurt Kirschner and Scott Gregerson.
Good evening. Kurt Kirschner with Jones Day. I'm an attorney representing Stanford Healthcare Valley Care, here to oppose the measure and to offer thoughts on 2 points relating to the initiative. First, I want to make clear that this initiative has nothing to do with quality. It has nothing to do with infection rates. It has everything to do with a union objective trying to target Stanford Healthcare. And Livermore, like the city of Palo Alto, is caught in the middle of that. There is litigation pending over this initiative, and it will continue. And unfortunately, Livermore is just caught in the middle of this, like some other healthcare providers are in the city of Livermore. Second point, with respect to the ballot question, we think it is vital that when this is presented to the voters, that they truly understand what this measure is about. And we fear that the proposed ballot question that has been put forward to you in the staff report does not fully reflect the way in which this ballot measure actually works. We have provided to you a letter dated July 19th that's in your supplemental report that makes some suggestions for changes to the ballot and to the ballot question. Staff did a supplemental report where they further edited the ballot question. We believe that the ballot question that we put forward in our July 19th letter actually still remains the best way to reflect this initiative on the ballot measure. And that is because it includes the words of the types of payers that actually would be benefited by this measure, who are not patients. By and large, patients don't directly pay for their health care. The payers who would benefit, presumably, from this initiative are primary insurers, secondary insurers, and other payers, many of whom are out of state. And we think it's important that the voters see that. Also, this measure excludes Medicare, Medicaid, and other kind of government payers. And we think it is important that the voters see that reflected on the ballot question. The further revised staff report changes the language to, rather than patients are charged, to billed for patients. But this is also not a billing measure. This is a very complex and unprecedented rebate system. And we think, therefore, that it's not actually accurate to refer to this with the term billing, which is in the further revised staff report. So we would like to reassert the ballot question that we submitted in our July 19th letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kushner. Scott Gregerson.
Good evening, Mayor Marchand, Council, staff. My name is Scott Gregerson. I'm the president of Stanford Healthcare Valley Care. We provided you a report today by Dr. Cleverly. He's a 45-year veteran of the healthcare industry, also an economist. And our hope was to really help support your work. Having seen your report late this afternoon, frankly, I was inspired. You did incredible work on your own. As it's once been said, healthcare is complicated, and you did a great job distilling it out. So congratulations to all of you. That was not easy work. In the Cleverly report, it cited, as did the staff report, that the actual costs were not considered in this initiative. And so essentially, things like malpractice insurance, audit costs, legal costs, none of those are incorporated. And so by the methodology, if you add 15% to their system, we will lose money on every single patient. We will lose money even on the private patients that we rely on to help subsidize those who simply can't pay. So under their initiative, we will lose money on every patient. And unfortunately, you cannot run a hospital and lose money and stay productive. We're obviously proud to serve this community. We've been proud to be here now almost 60 years, 57 years. Healthcare is changing. We want it to be much, much more affordable than it's been. It is one of our primary focuses, and it will be forever here in this community. We want to provide affordable healthcare. But the problem is this initiative has nothing to do with quality. It has nothing to do with affordability. It has nothing to do with staffing ratios. It simply is a mechanism to provide rebates back to insurance companies and cause problems for our organization. And so it's interesting. I look at the staff report, and I only got a chance to see it this afternoon, but you look at 211 organizations that are in the Livermore community. And yes, we are one of them, and we're proud to be. But it's inspiring to see the people who are here and have committed their lives to serving this community. You have everything from speech therapists to substance abuse clinics, and those are important parts of what make Livermore what it is today. This puts everything at risk. This is not just putting Stanford Healthcare Valley Care at risk or Kaiser at risk. This is putting everybody you see on that list at risk. And frankly, as inspired as I am to see those people who have committed their lives to this community, I also know what's at risk. And I'm going to ask the council to support me in opposing this measure and making sure we have an educated voter going into that booth, because if we do, and this is Livermore, we're going to be fine. But there's some work ahead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gregerson. That's last of the cards I have. Thank you all, for all of you, everyone that spoke tonight on this issue. Obviously, healthcare is something that we all feel very passionate about. So with that, I'm going to bring it back to the council for your comments. Councilmember Carling?
I think this is a horrible idea. The folks that have spoken for this initiative, both the last meeting that we had this discussion tonight, have either led by either the infection rates at Stanford or the amount of money that Stanford makes. And this, I don't understand how this measure applies to my dentist, for example. What does that got to do with my dentist? I mean, we have 211, as pointed out by one of the speakers, we have 211 organizations or entities, if you will, providing health care in this community, dentists and optometrists, doctors, and so on and so forth. And this has nothing to do with them. This has to do with the beef that SEIU has with Stanford. And I don't understand why they're taking it down on us. I'll also point out, as I think Mr. Kirchner pointed out was that there are two communities in the Bay Area that are being targeted. We're one of them. The other one's Palo Alto. Sort of begs the question of why those two communities have been selected. I don't know the answer to that, but that does concern me. Mr. Jones brought up about the cost that it's going to take for somebody to write a rebuttal to this. Well, I think one of us up here is going to do that, and you know how much we get paid. So this is a bit of a fantasy to think it's going to cost the city a lot. What will cost the city a lot is the administration of this. It's going to be horrible. And what it's going to mean to the city, the citizens, is if we're going to create the bureaucracy in the city to administer this, something else is going to have to be cut. Because we can't afford all the things that we have planned and add this burden to the staff. So I just think that this is I could go on and on. I let some of my other colleagues speak to this issue, but I think this is a horrible idea.
Councilmember Coomber?
Yeah, I am a complete echo here. And I'd like to go a step further in bluntness and to shame on the union for not staying at the negotiating table. Shame on you for putting the people of Livermore at risk of losing healthcare providers and coming out here and making me either drive to Fremont or wherever I want to see my endocrinologist, my orthopedist, or get a new wheelchair. Shame on you. This is putting everybody here at risk. And I'm looking at you. What's troubled me in the past with this is that for all the provisions about rebates, and they were selling this when they were getting signatures, is the Safeway I was going into, was as free health care. We can get you free health care. That's how the out-of-town signature providers were selling it. It's free health care. Don't you want free health care? Well, I didn't sign anything because I said I have to make these decisions later on and I won't be able to sign your damn petition. But this wasn't what it was about when I read the first 3 sentences of it. And when I got to the point about every individual who uses a medical provider has to provide the records from what they got paid. Well, how can you possibly know if that is too much or too little or anything if you don't know what they're going to get treated for, which you can't know because of HIPAA? How fallacious is the whole process here? I'm just astounded that it has to go onto a ballot. And yeah, I've been stewing about this since the first time we spoke about it, and I have the same concerns and more so, and I get angrier every time I think about it because it puts every one of you watching TV because you may have a disability that you can't come down here and visit the council chambers and listen to us. Every one of you is now putting at risk your ability to access healthcare providers in Livermore. And as a community member, that's what it comes down to for us. I don't care about your union issues. I think those belong at a negotiating table. You need to talk. If you don't want to talk, then you're probably not going to get very far. But you sure won't do it by cutting off our access to healthcare here in Livermore.
Thank you, Councilmember Coomber. Vice Mayor Warner?
Yeah, I would feel deeply the same way. I've lived here a long time, and I've seen issues come and go. I think this is the most serious threat to our quality of life that I've ever seen, and I think we've got to, within what we can do, defeat this, frankly. So, and I guess we got several things we've got to do going forward, but I just hope that people in the community see this for what it is, and we've got to make sure it doesn't prevail.
Again, I agree with my colleagues. The startup costs, the administration costs. I was struck by one of the speakers tonight who said the city has better things to do with its money. And just to give a comparison, the annual administration costs are 40% of our library budget. 40% of the library budget will be spent going through what healthcare costs, And I don't know what it costs. Yeah, that's not what I'm trained to do. We in the city are service providers: police, fire, roads, water, sewer, services. I'm not a regulator. This isn't what we do. It's not what we do best. What we do best is provide services to our community, which is what makes Livermore with the remarkable quality of life that we have. I was also struck by Dr. Marcel. And I'm thinking about like the here and now, right now, but the fact that there's going to be fewer new practitioners. Because I'm looking around at some of the folks that I deal with, and as was pointed out, most of us old here up here are rather old. Thank you, Mr. Wente. But I'm looking at my practitioners, and they're starting to get up there in age, and we're going to need new people coming in here. And if they're going to look like, okay, well, this city's regulated and that one's not, and recognizing what it costs to do business here, I'm not going to be an unregulated. I'll go to the unregulated environment rather than this strict regulations, and just the direct costs that. I know a lot of nurses that have worked in intensive care nurseries and the like, and there have been babies that were $1 million before they left the hospital, and there was no insurance. So where does that figure into this equation that you're stuck to 115% of what it costs to provide care to a patient when one patient just cost you $1 million? And you don't have a mechanism to recoup that. So, as has been pointed out a couple of times tonight, this is complicated. And I had several people read several variations of the ballot statement, not ballot statement, but the ballot measure that goes on the ballot. They read it like 5 times, and they still weren't quite sure what it meant or how they should vote on it because it's complicated. And we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. And also the need to make sure that we have an informed electorate. Now, one of the great things about Livermore is Livermore has they're smart people that live here in Livermore, and they read the ballot statements, they study the arguments, so that's very important. So first thing I'd like to do is, if there's interest in the council, I'd like to appoint a subcommittee to draft the ballot argument, and also the rebuttal argument. Is anybody fired up to speak to that?
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, Vice Mayor Warner. Oh, good heavens, you got all kinds of folks.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Yes.
If I may, this is a good conversation to have. I think we have a couple items on.
Put them in the wrong order.
Correct. So I think your first item of business today.
All right, then. That's why you're here.
So your first item of business today is to adopt a resolution to accept the report.
Okay.
9212 report, and then your next option will be to consider one of two resolutions. One resolution to adopt the initiative, or another resolution to send it to election. And then if you send it to election, that would be the appropriate time to have a question.
Very good. So, first off, do I have a motion to accept the 9212?
I'll move that we accept the 9212 report.
I'll second that.
Moved by Councilmember Carling, seconded by Councilmember Coomber. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we accept the 9212 report. Now we decide whether or not this goes on the ballot or adopt the initiative. Do I have a motion? I'll take that.
Sure, I'll move we put it on the ballot.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Carling. Do a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilmember Coomber. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
It passed unanimously that this will go on the ballot.
And now with that action, the City Council is now vested with the opportunity to prepare a primary argument in opposition to the measure.
Okay.
If you'd like to consider a subcommittee to prepare that, they can then return at a future council meeting to present it to you as a whole for consideration. However, one thing to be considered is that we would need to call a special meeting for you to consider it as a body. The initial primary arguments are due in 14 days, which is August 6th. So we'd have to have a city council meeting between today and August 6th for you, whoever is appointed as the subcommittee, to prepare that primary argument back to you to consider.
Okay, so do we need to discuss whether or not we have a meeting on August 6th?
If it was on August 6th, you would be after the deadline. The ballot argument must be submitted to the elections official by the close of business on August 6th. My recommendation is if you want to have that meeting, you have it sometime before that.
Okay, so...
And if you're looking for further recommendation, the next Monday you have is July 30th.
July 30th?
That would give a little
Did we polled that, didn't we?
Do we have and?
Haven't heard back. We haven't heard back from everyone yet, but we do have 3.
We have 3? Okay. Or do we trust you guys to run with this, or we'd all like to see it first? I'd kind of like to see it. That's just the way I am. So, July 30th. Okay. Well, first off, is there interest in serving on a subcommittee to write the ballot arguments?
I think any of us would do it.
Pardon me?
I think any of us would do it.
Okay.
Oh,
Who's going to have time to do it?
I have time.
Okay. So
did I hear you, Bob?
He's out.
I have to pass. I'm going to be out of town for a couple of days.
So
A couple days
I'll
are
work
pretty
with
important.
the other Bob.
Okay. Okay. So I'll appoint Bob and Bob to the subcommittee. That's Vice Mayor Werner and Councilmember Carling to work on that.
How many words?
300.
All right. Okay. Then there was some discussion on the wording on the ballot. Now, is that what we consider here, or is that okay? So
You can consider that since that resolution has passed. You can consider amending motion to modify that question should you like.
okay. So that would be. So we have in the initiative, or in the staff report, we have a suggested ballot language. 414.
Where's the supplemental?
Yeah, as I said, I had several people read this, and they read it 5 times and still weren't quite.
So the item that you adopted was included in your supplemental information.
So I would direct you, if you want to modify that, I would direct your attention to that memorandum dated July 23rd, 2018, that has the revised language.
Right.
Which one?
As long as a red line showing the changes. Okay, that's this one. So this is one of our supplementals.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so the language that we have here, just for everybody's benefit, shall the measure regulating and limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, and other health care providers in Livermore may bill for medical services provided to patients in Livermore be adopted. Everybody get that? No. And a revised resolution option B. Hang on a second here.
So the language you read is the revised language that was in the supplemental report. The question before you is, do you want to further revise that or add additional language or changes?
Okay, so here is, wait a minute here. Right, okay, so in the, oh, here we go. Wait a minute. All right, so a revised resolution option B reflected this change is attached. So on what page is that in the supplemental memorandum?
So if you take your supplemental memorandum, it's two-sided.
Right.
The first page is your memorandum. If you flip that and look to the back of it, You have the question, which is 1, and then below that is the question that you currently have going to the electorate, which reads, shall the measure regulating and limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill for medical services provided to patients in Livermore be adopted?
Well, yeah, it's wordy and difficult. One of the things that I think is important that is considered in the statement is to include, since this is for Livermore voters, who's going to be paying. So what I would suggest adding was something to the effect of, shall the measure be adopted, unless we have to have adopted the last word.
That is,
the syntax is weird.
The syntax is weird. The elections code is clear. Shall the measure is the beginning of the sentence, and the last part of the sentence is be adopted. Your area to work within is between those two statements.
Well, that makes no sense.
That is the elections
Okay,
code.
but so bear with me. Doesn't this sound much better? Shall the measure be adopted, which would require the city of Livermore to fund its community development department to regulate and limit the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers may bill for services provided to patients only in Livermore. Ah, that sounds great, doesn't it? Be adopted. Raging enthusiasm.
Well,
Okay, so that in that case,
So that is a question for the council.
I think you're heading in the right direction. I do think it could be worded to meet his need.
okay, so what
Be
about
adopted, go at the.
shall the measure?
So we're pretty free to, between the shall and be adopted, or
So here's what we can do. So the first three, the elections
It's
code.
complicated. Healthcare is complicated.
So the elections code, section 13119, provides that the language shall start, shall the measure, and then there's an opening to describe the measure, and it concludes with be adopted. The additional guidance is in the elections code that the question must be true and impartial, not argumentative, and not likely to create prejudice. Beyond that, you have discretion to form that question.
Okay, so in that case, shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to fund its community development department to regulate and limit the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers may bill for services provided to patients only in Livermore be adopted?
That would work.
So does it make sense?
can I look at it?
Sure. It's this one right here.
It's a little awkward.
It's what?
Does that make sense to you folks out there? Does that make any?
No,
it doesn't.
Is this is something we got to get this language tonight?
Yes, sir.
Well, why do we have to? Suppose is it too long? Do you think it's too long, or what?
No.
Well, it doesn't matter what department of the city. Right?
Yeah, that's what. That's what I was saying. I mean, you could say, shall the measure requiring the city of
I was looking for
Livermore
a punchline.
to fund the regulation. You could skip community development department because that's not going to mean anything. So you could say to fund the regulation and limit the amounts. And
provide the
yeah,
funds
and
to
take out patients in Livermore. I don't know why you say only in Livermore. Be adopted. So I was just going to go from fund to regulation.
Or how about to
Fund the regulation.
fund?
Well, so can I?
Sure.
I've got a few thoughts here. I mean, we kind of have to be neutral on this, right?
Right. But I mean, we have to say, because if you say there's going to be regulation and limits, who's going to be doing that?
Right, right. But the point is, I mean, the fundamental thing is that this measure purportedly regulates, right? And it doesn't we don't know that necessarily, but you can't say shall the measure purportedly regulating, right? We can't put that in there, right? But I'm just wondering, we're not, I mean, to what extent can we speak about the consequences here?
That is for your argument, not for the question.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So it's just simply, shall the measure, forcing the city of Livermore to regulate it and spend money on it, right? I mean, that's kind of that's where you're getting going on that one, right? But it's almost like shall the measure that forces the city of Livermore to regulate and limit the amount specified, or regulate it, or something like that. Can we say, shall the measure that requires the city of Livermore to fund a regulatory thing, right? No, it doesn't say that in this one version.
Well, the one that John's got.
So
Right,
shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to fund the regulation and the limits on the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers may bill for services provided to patients only in Livermore be adopted?
Well, I mean, it is a little bit hard to
I like it a little
understand,
bit
but I mean, it's more, shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to become a regulator of, that's kind of where we're at, right?
But I think it's also the fact that we have to fund it.
Well,
I think
that's what I'm
gonna
saying.
be
So
the
that
main
the city of,
issue.
but here's the point, is that it's, first of all, I mean, it's like more government regulation, which we don't need. So the first thing is, do we want the city of Livermore to become a healthcare regulator? I mean, shall the measure forcing requiring the city of Livermore to regulate, to
fund and regulate.
Well, no, actually, I mean, it's to fund a bureaucracy to do this. I mean, that's
Well,
what it is.
essentially, yes.
Regulation,
Right? And we probably can't use that word,
So one thing,
but that's what it is.
So one thing to be clear, the measure itself that's before you does not regulate the quality of healthcare. It just regulates the charges that what can be billed for patient care services in Livermore. It does nothing with regard to infection rates. It does nothing with regard to the quality of healthcare. This regulates what the costs can be billed or billed for services provided in Livermore.
So we can get to the fact is that it's forcing, I mean, where the mayor is getting it, it's forcing us to become a regulator, right? And to bear the costs of being a regulator. So it's really, should the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost and to become and bear the cost of regulating healthcare be adopted?
To bear the cost of regulating healthcare.
I think the cost is accurate, but again, we're not the city is not being directed to regulate healthcare by this measure.
Well, okay, well, to regulate the billing of healthcare.
Correct. The
So
amounts that may be-
shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to regulate, bear the cost, to regulate and bear the cost. Let's see, what is it? I had it, but then I lost
To
it.
fund the regulation and limit the amounts the specified hospitals.
And we don't have to go there. It's just simply it's to regulate the cost of healthcare. It
To
should be.
regulate and limit the amounts, or just regulate the cost of healthcare?
Well, but the point is, it's not that we're actually going to be able to do much about that. It'll probably go up. Of course, if it go to zero, if nobody's here. But right? I mean, that's one way to get to it. I mean, nobody's charging anything because they're not here. But the point is that I think you were getting to that it's requiring us to become the regulator and bear the burden of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's the point.
So what's the best way to say that?
Right, but there are two things. Is that it really is forcing us to regulate the billing of health care and bear the burden of it.
And there has to be a mention of the cost to the city, sure.
Right.
They like bear the costs.
I would start off with bearing the cost and to
bear the
to
cost.
regulate the billing of healthcare expenses.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So
I used to write policy in a lab.
yeah, go ahead.
You know?
So can you remember what you said and say
No.
it again?
Yeah, I can work it out. Yeah, but I would start off with the
Bear the cost of regulation.
yes, with the cost to the city coming first, and then the what the city is providing for that cost, which is to regulate the billing of healthcare expenses to the residents of Livermore.
But from specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers.
If we want to
Because
add that.
Well, because it is very, it's.
Is that amount of
specific in the
specificity
initiative.
required, do you think, there, Mr. City
So
Attorney?
it's all healthcare providers. I mean, you don't have to
But they're sp-
enumerate them.
They're specified, because there's some that.
Yeah, there are some that
No,
are accepted,
providers that
because I
aren't.
didn't see a lot of mental health clinics or anything like that in there.
Medi-Cal and Medicare are excluded.
Yeah.
Well, say that,
Let me
excluding.
So let me see if I'm tracking the council's conversation right now. Dealing with the provision we have. Let's see. Looking at what we have in the supplemental staff report, shall the measure requiring the city to fund the regulation and limits on the amounts that specified hospitals, medical care clinics, I think you added the word dentists, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill for medical services provided to patients in Livermore be adopted. Is that getting closer?
You had to fund versus bear the cost, I think.
Oh, bear the cost.
Yeah.
It's bear the, I mean, you can do it this way. It's bear the cost and other burdens. There's way more than just dollar amounts. There's other burdens. Put it in that. But the emphasis is, if we get the ability to do this, we really have to emphasize that this is painful.
There's a cost and an administrative burden as well.
Yeah.
Regulation.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the
but,
cost and administrative burdens
So it-
associated with regulating. Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost and administrative burdens of regulating da-da-da-da-da?
Yeah.
How's that? You
That's
got
good
it?
for
Is that
part
close
one.
enough? Can somebody get that and feed it back to us?
And then define, I think, too, in part two of that, what they're regulating. To find it, in part two is
That's what I
they're
meant.
gonna
Is that,
regulate. Yeah.
but the first thing is, shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the costs and administrative burdens of
to look at your
regulating the
healthcare
pricing?
whatever? It's just. But
Privacy.
the thing is that we're going to bear the costs and administrative burden. And I would say the considerable cost and administrative burden, but you're not going to let me.
No, no adjectives. That's argumentative.
Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost and administrative burdens of regulating and limiting the pricing or the amounts that may be billed, the specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers may bill for services provided to patients only in Livermore be adopted? We're getting close.
Don't like that.
We have a concern about bear the cost is fine. It was the administrative burden. So other ways to say that would be the enforcement of regulations, bear the cost of enforcing regulations, limiting the amounts.
You're saying remove the word onerous?
Yeah.
No, I think that I liked it. It was bear the costs and
The administrative burdens of their.
well, no, I know, but the
Bear the cost of enforcing regulations which limit the amount essentially. So that's
Regulations that would limit the amounts.
down the center.
Okay, there
and
we
then,
go.
And then, essentially, that specified hospitals, medical clinics, and other healthcare providers in Livermore. And then you're down to the argument about whether may bill for medical services provided to patients. And then there were several other thoughts on that, pulling from the initiative of whether you wanted to specifically enumerate those payers as they're listed in the initiative. Primary insurers, secondary insurers. You're getting pretty wordy at that point, but certainly within your realm.
So, shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of regulating and
Enforcing regulations limiting the amounts.
limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists have bill for services. Okay, why don't you read back what you guys have? 'Cause that sounds awfully close.
It's almost like what you want to do is put it up on the screen if somebody was typing.
We don't
it in.
have a screen like that.
Well, we
Maybe
didn't?
someday.
Don't we?
So, shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of regulating and limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers may bill for services provided to patients only in Livermore be adopted? Anybody?
I think you skipped over enforcing regulations.
Oh, I didn't have enforcing.
didn't, I thought
Did we have enforcing in there?
Mark mentioned it.
One version you had
You have
to
enforcing?
bear the cost of enforcing regulations
Oh, okay, there we
limiting the
go.
amounts.
Of enforcing.
So who develops the regulations?
So most of the regulations are set forth, well, I should say, an outline of the regulations are set forth in the initiative. The city has certain opportunities to flesh it out as long as that is consistent with the initiative itself. The initiative, once adopted or if adopted by the voters, can only be changed by the voters.
Well, what I meant was, I mean, you can have some initiative like this, but then the actual, I mean, I always thought that it had to, whatever got passed by law had to be interpreted into voluminous regulations. I mean, how does that translation from what's passed into the real stuff?
The initiative delegates the Community Development Department as being tasked
So-
with reading that.
So this is why I'm
With the city being
right. So we not just have to enforce it; we have to develop them, right? I mean, we got to. There's got to be somebody who's going to have to write these things.
You're correct, and those are good observations. There's two exercises we have before us today. One exercise is to create the ballot question itself, and then there's the second exercise, which we have a subcommittee to develop the language.
No,
for the
but what
ballot
I'm saying is we're talking about it isn't just should we develop the costs of enforcing. It's it's almost developing and enforcing. It's both. And that's what I meant. There's a lot of administrative burden here that's just right. So anyway, so I think it's developing. Should we bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations to do the data?
Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may charge for, may bill for medical services provided to patients in Livermore. Be adopted.
You want to say only in Livermore, since it is? Or that?
I don't think the only is necessary.
All right. You want to hear that one more time?
All right.
attorney
Shall
to
the
read it?
measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill for medical services provided to patients in Livermore be adopted?
How about controlling rather than limiting?
I didn't hear that last one.
The question was whether you would want the word controlling rather than limiting.
Limiting seems to have a positive connotation. That
Controlling. Ooh, yeah.
Uh,
Controlling sounds.
Is that,
Yeah,
is
for
that not
those-
so negative as to be precluded by anything, or is that okay? 'Cause I like it too.
Should we become control freaks? Yeah. So is there,
Controlling, yeah, because that's what that's what regulations do, is they control
Yeah.
the amounts that can be billed.
Language initiative. What's the initiative actually say?
well, it isn't, we got regulating and limiting in this one thing or whatever.
Regulating.
So
And I believe the words limiting are actually in the initiative, which
Yeah.
would be the basis, rather than us inventing a new word to describe what the initiative
Yeah.
claims to do. So
You asked earlier if it made sense not just to the staff, but to the some of the members of the audience. Are we going to try and get some reaction there or not?
What's that?
Well, I'm just wondering, do we... It's getting late, and we get kind of wrapped around
So
here.
the actual words in the initiative are pricing, limitations, and rebates. So I think staying with the word limitation is probably a more down the middle, especially since you have a number of other regulatory words in your now long question.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
as long as Mark's got it.
So
written
this
down.
this is, I mean, this is, you know, as I say, this is, and we've all said, I mean, this is a very serious threat. And I just, can I see this in writing? I mean, is it possible to,
You can do that.
I mean, just, if you think you've got it, just write it down and show it to me.
All right. Why don't you take just a quick minute while we scribe?
Right, that's what I'm saying. I think it's serious enough. I just want to see it.
We'll be able to do that in our new council chambers.
Right. Well, I think if we had somebody still here running the computer, we might be able to see it, but
Just a quick PowerPoint slide.
does this make sense? I mean, I think we should
Yeah,
just
that's fine.
seriously read this.
I just have to ask a real quick question here of, I'm a firm believer in asking the experts. It's just Mr. Kirchner or Mr. Gregerson, are we kind of on the right track on this? Is this something that's, Mr. Gregerson?
Please, Kurt. We, on behalf of Stanford Healthcare Valley Care, we do think that your direction is fine as long as it's accurate. One of our concerns is this is not a billing measure, it's not a cost measure, it's a charges measure to payers. The payers are insurers primarily. That's absent from your current summary. That's one of our concerns, because if a voter sees the ballot question and it talks about limiting costs or bills to patients, they may get the impression that they themselves, as a patient, are going to see a benefit from this, where in fact, the beneficiary of the reduced cost, limited costs, are going to be insurers, primary, secondary, and other kinds of insurers. Those are the primary payers of healthcare. That's who this initiative sends the money to, and we think that should be reflected in the ballot question.
Yeah, but I'll bet the average citizen probably thinks there's the payer, not the insurer.
Yeah, but usually
I think that's the problem. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think the average citizen thinks the way you do.
But I think if in that same vein, if we said primary or secondary insurance carriers rather than payer, Because I think payer people would think, well, yeah, that's me. I'm paying for health care, when in fact they are not. So I agree with you.
Sure, but how many people know there's primary and secondary insurers?
It's complicated.
No, I know, and that's my point.
Right. And the question we acknowledge, the ballot question is complicated, but that's not any of your fault. It's the initiative's fault. This is an incredibly complex initiative that is being put to the voters. And therefore, even though the question is somewhat complicated, I think that's just a byproduct of the initiative that's before you.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you for your input. We have one chance to get this right.
We haven't gotten in the excluding Medicare yet either, right?
Hmm?
We didn't get the excluding Medicare in.
Yeah.
We're going to put that in. Well, that's in the initiative, though, isn't it? Yeah. Yes.
All right. Here we go.
Can we mention that the mechanism is the rebate? Is that, aren't there other mechanisms, or is that just?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any value to that. It might confuse the
Yeah.
issue, perhaps.
I think it's the idea of rebates, the people that think take money back.
I
and
think
the rebates go to the insurers, the insurance carriers.
I think that might be one of the things to really emphasize in the argument as to how this thing works. Right?
So
I mean,
push that more in the argument than in the
yeah.
statement.
Did you hear what I just said? I think that we're going to have to get to your point in the argument.
If I may, we did a suggestion for in our July 19th letter. There is a statement of the ballot question in there if you do want to see how we put it together.
Oh, it does? It is?
Do we have a copy of that here?
It should be in your supplemental
Yes,
package.
it's right here. It is.
Okay, and we got lots of little. things
Okay,
here.
so-
I know.
Which page?
Well, supplemental.
Well,
It says Jones Day at the top.
There you go. This one.
oh, here's, okay.
Okay, so let me, where we are right now. Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other health care providers in Livermore may bill for medical services provided to patients in Livermore be adopted? And there's now discussion on whether to add the insurance carriers and payers. Oh, there we go. Shall the measure regulating?
That's this one, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think that overly helps.
Okay, let's see. Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, or other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill patients or other individuals, primaries, insurers, secondary insurers, and other payers, excluding government payers, for medical services provided to patients in Livermore be adopted. Wow.
Well,
and
I
how
mean,
would you vote on that?
Well, I was going to say that's painful enough. You would say no.
Yeah.
If I may, I know I'm popping up from the
That-
gallery. That is a long statement, but I would say that it is a fair statement of what's in the initiative, because the limits are on charges to the payer, and the payer could be an individual, It could be a primary insurer, it could be a secondary insurer. And then it's also important to the voters to know that if they're covered by Medi-Cal or Medicare, this is not covering their services. So it is a long statement, but we think it's a fair statement that could go on the ballot.
Yeah, the thing is that, you know, excluding, rather than saying government payers, but I mean, you're going to get...
That's Medicare, Medi-Cal.
I know, but I mean, you're going to get though using Medicare, Medi-Cal as opposed to government payers is more of a red flag.
Okay, so use Medicare, Medi-Cal,
Yeah.
excluding Medicare and Medi-Cal.
And other payers is like, you know, what? I mean, I'm just trying to shorten it, and I don't know that add other payers matters. I mean, who cares? I mean, who are these unnamed others anyway, right? I mean,
That's just in the initiative. That's the way that the initiative states the
oh, okay.
Oh, okay, so that's
All
the
right.
language.
But we don't have to say it the way they say it, right?
Mr. Alcala can probably comment on that. We were just trying to replicate the language in section 8.21.020G.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think we have to, because we're obviously saying things here that they didn't say. So I think I would I mean, I like this suggestion. I'd drop the and other payers, and I would name the government payers that are of interest, and then I'm good, getting close.
May charge patients or other individuals, primary insurers, secondary
Well,
insurers.
And who cares whether it's primary or secondary? You just say insurers.
Insurers.
Right? I mean, tertiary insurers or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. And I think this charge patients or other individuals, drop that. I mean, who cares about other
Drop
individuals?
other individuals.
Yeah, I just say may charge patients or insurers and other payers, excluding, and that's where I can put the other one, because the other individuals are payers, right?
Originally, I say may charge patients, insurers, or insurers excluding Medicare and Medicaid.
Right.
Okay. Okay, shall the measure requiring the City of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulation limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other health care providers in Livermore may bill patients or insurers excluding Medicare and Medicaid to patients in Livermore be adopted.
All right. Let's get one last complete draft, and we're there.
Oh my God, it's going to be up to me then.
Did you, the staff, did you follow that? Or did you, Sarah, did you just type that in?
Can you hit print? Yes.
Well, actually,
there's no raccoons coming through the wall. So
actually,
it's even better.
wait a minute. You got it on your screen?
Okay, could
So
you
I
read
can come
that?
take a picture of it and look at it, right? Why don't you, right? I mean, you can text that to me.
Oh, that.
The version right before the last one had shall the measure requiring the City of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts specified. Hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other health care providers in Livermore may bill patients or insurers, excluding Medicare and Medicaid,
For medical services.
provided to patients in Livermore be adopted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so if you could read that, Sarah, one more time. Okay, okay, Mark.
All right. Shall the measure requiring the City of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill patients or insurers, excluding Medicare and Medicaid, for medical services provided to patients in Livermore be adopted.
Wow.
It's that simple.
Sound like a plan? It's not too wordy, but I think it gets to the point. Oh, so what?
I think unfortunately it's as wordy as it has to
It
be.
is too
I think
wordy.
you're right.
Yeah, I am a believer in brevity.
Right, but
yeah, there's really
unfortunately-
no way to make this brief with the number of issues that are non sequitur to the alleged problem have arisen out of this.
We all know what Mr. Bumble says about the law. Okay, now that you got that, is that what you?
Here it is.
Yeah. Why don't you read it one more time?
You want me to
So,
read it?
yeah, 'cause that way everybody will hear it.
Okay. Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the costs of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill patients or insurers, excluding Medicare and Medicaid, for medical services provided to patients in Livermore be adopted?
So what do you think?
I don't know about the for medical services provided to patients in Livermore. I don't know that because these are Livermore.
Seems like we have too many Livermores in there.
Yeah, I would drop that.
I'd probably drop the first in Livermore rather than the second.
Oh yeah.
Drop the first in Livermore and keep
Yeah.
the second one.
Yeah. So let me try that. Shall the measure? You got this. Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the costs of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers or may bill patients or insurers excluding Medicare or Medicare? No, I think you got to keep the first one. Healthcare providers in Livermore may bill patients or insurers excluding Medicare or Medicaid for that's it. Be adopted. I don't think the
All right.
for medical services provided to patients in Livermore needs to be there.
Okay.
Is that
The one issue you might want to have is at least for medical services. We're not regulating.
go
The
ahead,
same people might bill for other things that aren't
go,
regulated.
go ahead,
But we
say
try
it, revise it one more time because this still doesn't roll off the tongue, right? And
It never will.
it never will, but it is still not right.
Okay.
So try it one more time, and I'll come take a picture.
It already sounds like it was created by some kind of Greek mythological creature that doing all this.
Chimera.
Yes.
All right, one more time. Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts to specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill patients or insurers, excluding Medicare and Medicaid? Nope, we got two things separated. May bill patients for medical services. Bill. Nope. As good as it's going to get. All right. Shall a measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill patients or insurers excluding Medicare and Medicaid for medical services be adopted?
Yeah, again, I just saw it. It should be, try this. Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts for medical services that specified, get the medical services up front, right? Did you see what I just said?
Yes.
that, then you don't have for medical services, you just got be adopted.
Okay.
Right? It's cleaner.
Does it sound like it fits?
Let's try it again. Shall the measure requiring the city of Livermore to bear the cost of developing and enforcing regulations limiting the amounts for medical services that specified hospitals, medical clinics, dentists, and other healthcare providers in Livermore may bill patients or insurers, excluding Medicare and Medicaid, be adopted?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to go for another hour or so?
No. We got one more item after this. We got
Okay.
Okay, so the action
Did
before
everybody
you-
get that?
So the action before you would be to amend the resolution you adopted just a moment ago to change the question from the one that was previously in there, replace it with this language. So the motion is to replace that language with this question.
All right. Is there a motion?
Well, I'll move what we just said there.
Okay. Moved by Vice Mayor Warner, seconded by
I'll second.
Councilmember Carling. Any discussion on that motion, which is amending the resolution? No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed unanimously. Very good. So we are done with 6.02. Thank you very much, one and all. Certainly appreciate your comments tonight. We have one more item that we got to get to, and we need to get to it quickly. So thank you very much. 6.03, a resolution of necessity. We have Mr. Alessio.
Honorable Mayor and Council, your staff is prepared to give a brief staff report if you'd like. Otherwise, if you've read the staff report.
I've read the staff report. Would you wish another? No, okay. Thank you ever so much, but you did such a great job on the staff report that we don't need to hear a presentation as well.
You're quite welcome.
With that, I have one speaker card for the matters for consideration. Carl Wente.
Mr. Mayor, Council, that was good government in a painful way. Getting through there. Also,
Making sausage.
What is good government? We talked about that. Jeffersonian and Hamiltonian, what do we believe in? How does it all go? But fundamentally, the republic for which it stands. We pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands. And sometimes that initiative and referendum system can get in the way of the function of good government. First meeting I had to sit down with Mr. Alcala was to educate myself on the referendum system that we have here and the initiative system, which was an attempt to give democracy back to the people. But on some level, it can undermine because a special interest group can get in there and get things out there and undermine the flow and function. Alas, I'm not speaking on this agendized item. I will get to it. So we have a resolution of necessity of an eminent domain. Interesting what goes in an eminent domain. The project is necessary. The property is necessary within that project. High public benefit, lowest public detriment, and an offer's been made. That offer, pursuant to the California Government Code 7267, you have to get an appraisal. Just one? Or do you have to get multiple appraisals? Just one appraisal. And is that public domain or is that part of a private closed session? I don't know if he's allowed to answer. Doesn't matter. And then if not, if they can't get to it, so the offer's been made and then it goes to jury. So we need this resolution coming through. But as such, there was some history that goes into this for everyone that goes through this packet. You get to page 430 of this packet, you get to a memo or a staff report from Paul Spence, Community Development Director, and going through where the process is as it relates to us. This is what I talked about at the beginning. It's a good review of where we are and the process that we went through. So anybody that says that the council or the staff did not listen, did not bear witness to the process, or they're just flat lying to you, because you have listened. It is a complex, diverse thing that we're getting through trying to get there. How many houses do we have to put on that per the affordable housing loan? How much open space can we get in there? All of those things. And we came back. Parking, community character and design, open space, traffic, circulation, hotel, retail, hotel location, cultural finances, public finances, and housing. So we have a great report in here. And then that was of a date. So January 29. So you can go to the city clerk, January 29, and then it also has the attachments there to go back through. So you can always reference back the process that we've gone through to get to this point itself. So this one's a no-brainer. Get her done. Sorry for taking more of your time because I know everyone wants to go to bed. Those property owners, sorry that your property are getting in the way of what is good government and good progress for our city.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. Close the public comment period. Any discussion at this point? Do I have a motion?
I'll move we accept the staff's recommendation.
Moved by Councilmember Coomber. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Carling. I guess we're done.
I spoke. That wasn't even a long.
Boy, we have
Oh,
limited
should I
that
got more
discussion.
time than that?
Okay, in that case, there being no further discussion on the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passed unanimously, 4 votes. With that, so that moves ahead. On to matters initiated. We got a minute. We can do the report out. We can do a report out next time, and just if you have matters initiated.
Got one matters initiated.
You have matters initiated, Councilmember Coomber?
Yeah, I wanted to ask.
Councilmember Carling?
But let him go first because I got to find mine.
Okay. I think I know what it is. Matters initiated.
Okay, I got one, and this is the second time Mr. Schmidt has showed up to talk about this, and want to ask that staff work with the Valley Opera and Shakes to talk about what might be feasible with respect to building the storage facilities and construction facilities that they need. And I don't know exactly where it is, but it's over on the other side of that wall is kind of where we're at. Plus, to what extent a temporary use of this building might be feasible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Sure. I just had one. Mr. Scott has brought up several times about where the homeless can go, and I know I had asked some months ago about. He brought up the idea of a parking lot, and I just wondered what the status of that was.
We actually are working through that. It is a little more complicated than you think, but that idea is actually under active exploration right now.
Okay. Well, I know he's brought it up several times. I just want to know what the progress was. Thank you.
Okay. There was. You also had the what you brought up earlier on the.
Well, yeah, the other one about making sure we got our norms and values with respect to that, right? So that's.
And we assumed that you did that at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there was and I just had a question. It wasn't clear what the next process was with respect to, what was it, the crossing at Lawrence Elementary?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too.
So somehow, I would just like maybe a quick summary of where we're at there, or what
We can provide you a quick memo on both the criteria we use and how that criteria was applied in this case.
Whose responsibility is it to provide a crossing guard? I mean, she mentioned that.
Locally, the city has taken that obligation on. It can be shared by school districts and cities. We have done that locally.
Oh, really? Oh, I assumed it was going to be a school district responsibility. Huh. Okay, thanks.
Wait, any other matters initiated? Okay. Very good. Well, in that case, meeting adjourned. Let's see. The next meeting is in August. No, July 30th. July 30th. Looks like we'll be back for that. Yes. Okay. With that, meeting adjourned.